Hello and welcome to the Nash Tackle Off the Hook podcast. Just to make you aware, this podcast may contain some explicit/offensive language, and if that's not your thing, you don't have to listen, but I have given you a warning. I hope you enjoy the rest of the show.
You don't know the half of it, but anyway, I'm skating on the thinnest ice known to man.
He said, and they put a poison in the tank that just instantly kills them. He went and we'd run out of it, so we cut their heads off with shovels.
Suddenly, bang! The whole boat exploded.
Take your sort of 8-inch long piranha and imagine that at 4, 5, maybe 6 feet.
I said, I've revived your dead fish. F off, he said. You haven't.
That was just humongous. It was... I couldn't believe what I was looking at.
I'm just battling this fish out, and I know it's a black man. I'm saying I'll never be a naughty boy again.
If you catch fish and you return them to the water, then you are my brother.
Hello and welcome to the Nash Tackle Off the Hook podcast. Today's guest, I've run out of superlatives in my vocabulary to talk about this man. A beautiful gentleman, an absolute living legend of all things carp fishing, and a member of the Nash stable for a very, very, very long time. It's none other than Steve Briggs. From one legend to another living legend, I've got Mr. Blair in the studio. Alan, how are you?
You can't put me in the same category as Steve. He is the king, and such a humble king. He's just a beautiful man. I know you use that word a lot, beautiful, but he's got such a nice mannerism. He's just a legend. He is a legend.
Do you know what? I actually haven't spent a great deal of time with him or worked with him that much, so I'm looking forward to today.
Yeah, genuinely 100% nice human being. And an inspiration. He's inspired me massively and tens of thousands of other people, not just in the UK, you know, because of the magazines back in the day. It would be difficult to open one and not see Briggsy in it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, total legend. I can't wait to see him myself. You might struggle to get him in here because I think everyone's going to want a bit of his time. Nah, real talk, like they are.
Yeah.
Kev will want to see him. Everyone is.
Yeah, mate,
legend.
what a boy.
Yeah.
When I finally get him in here,
Yep.
we're going to talk all things mega captures across his career, 1550.
Ridiculous.
But a topic that I want to talk to you about is the whole theme of travelling and carping. Now, obviously, in recent times with the whole COVID situation, travelling's been curtailed. But in terms of your thoughts, I know you've done a bit around Europe, mate. For you, that travel bug for carping a mega passion?
Yeah, massive. It goes back to that word adventure. And, you know, we can all go and have an adventure down the Park Lake or down the river or even around your syndicate. You know, you can turn it into a bit of a Boy Scout adventure, but nothing like loading the motor. Especially doing it with someone as well. You know, you've got a companion, a road trip partner, and whether that be going on the Eurotunnel or on the ferry, it's just so many bits like that make it epic. And then when you get over there, the freedom, you know, yeah, I love it. I missed it. I'm still missing it, if I'm honest, as I'm sure a lot of people listening or watching this have missed it. You know, even this week, in fact, even last night we were talking about it. The amount of foreign venues that are crippled as a result of it, you know, that would normally be booked from maybe March all the way through to possibly even November or December. No bookings, can't get into France. But yeah, let's not be negative about it. You know, there will be a time when we can get back over there and go and visit Europe and go fishing, and I relish that.
Highlights for you, European-wise? So many, I know, but if you were to pick out sort of standout places where they've sort of maybe had a bit more of an affinity than others, is there any?
I hate these questions, Hassan, because it degrades.
Yeah.
It degrades so many other things.
Yeah.
So, you know, Lake Bled, classic Lake Bled line. You know, it was epic. It was epic, but it's so many other places. I think, you know, if it's your first time, you don't need to go to Slovenia or Lake Bled. Just popping over to Belgium, or maybe just going on a French kind of commercial pay, like it will still be epic to you because it will be the first time of you doing that. When I look back to my real early years, those adventures were as good as, you know, some of the crazy 10 countries in 10 days kind of things. You got to put it into perspective. If it's your first time doing it, it's going to be monumental.
Yeah.
And exciting and new and different, whether that's the language, the driving on the other side of the road, the size and the scale of the venue or the fish you're fishing for, maybe the equipment you're using. There will always be so many new things compared to potentially going down to that same syndicate lake that you've been fishing for the last couple of years. So, yeah, it's all new and exciting. Yeah, I don't want to call anywhere.
Yeah, that's
I don't
fair.
want to call. I don't want to call anywhere. You know, if you ask Steve will probably say that there was a point in his angling where the Mecca was France.
Yeah.
Cassien. You know, that was the Mecca, and he drove down there and he found this lake and he fished it, and certainly for me as well, my early years of going abroad, it was all about France. It's accessible. It's just over the other side of the channel and stuff. But yeah, now I've got quite a lot of hunger for Germany. If I had to call it, I would say Germany is the new France in terms of numbers of big carp in these gravel pits. The accessibility is a lot harder though. They haven't got the commercial pay lake type venues, so it's very difficult to obtain licenses. But that is a mecca. Further afield, the world classic. The world is your oyster. Where can you not catch carp?
Yeah, true. I mean, carp fishing, we love a trend. Do you know what I mean? Folded reel handles, clothing, whatever it may be. There's loads of trends out there, but there always has been that trend of when it comes to sort of abroad, the sort of new venue, it's gone through France, it's gone through Sumbar, it's gone through Euro Aqua, it's gone through all these sort of phases where
Rainbow.
those venues, where they've had their time, if you like, and a new place comes to the forefront. For you, anywhere, maybe even further afield on the horizon with regards to that?
Places I'd personally like to visit, I would really like to go to like Finland, just for those vistas and those like just as far as the eye can see, unspoiled, untouched. And what am I going to catch? An 18-pound common? Probably, but it'll be a ridiculously incredible trip just because of the process and the journey to get there. And it's a country I've not visited, so it's kind of like just a new experience, new challenge. Would I get all that way and the waters are so vast and expansive? Would I even be able to catch one? I don't know. That makes it a challenge. Whereas, you know, if I go to Sumbar, I'd like to think a week of spotting out a bit of gear, I'm definitely going to catch a few fish. So you kind of almost know to a degree what's going to happen. So it's just a personal thing for me. Going somewhere like that, I feel I'm challenging myself. I'm going to go to Spain in a few weeks, hopefully. I've not done a lot there. You know, you think Spain, you think the Ebro, but Spain's a big country. You know, there's a lot of fishing and watching what Samir and Claire have done over this last sort of 12 months there, you know, it really opens your eyes. And then you've got places further afield than that. And I know when we discussed this yesterday, just America, you know, I could spend the rest of my life in the States fishing for carp and never have to go anywhere else because
the scene is big there. I was only talking the other day on Instagram to a chap, musician, incredible musician, rock band, but is developing a lake, a carp lake out there specific for carp anglers because the scene has developed that much. There's that many carp. There's that much of, there's buffalo carp. There's also normal, if you like, king carp. There's so much out there. And for us, going over there, realistically, it's pretty easy. There's no language barrier.
No.
There's none of that.
No.
You just get on a plane and your job done.
Yeah. So, and I always think that to myself, we've got Europe, the mecca of carp fishing, but beyond that, you know, I've caught carp in New Zealand, I've caught carp in China. I'd love to go to Japan. I'd love to go to Australia. I read a little snippet in one of the trade magazines yesterday. They've had some pretty severe flooding, and the carp over there, they make up, don't quote me on it, but like 70% of the biomass of the natural venues over there. They're that widespread, and through these floodings, now they're saying they're going to be everywhere because, of course, they'll travel across, you know, miles and miles and miles of floodland and then end up in new ponds and lakes. It's just, I say it again, the world is your oyster. And that really excites me.
Do you think for you will look further afield in the future rather than maybe just Europe?
Of course.
Yeah.
But, you know, something I've always been super conscious of, and I've said it numerous times, and it's why, as much as I loved Lake Bled, as much as I have been to Rainbow and enjoyed that, as much as, you know, I could list countless venues, what I don't want to fall into the trap of is going back time and time again. Time is precious. I don't get to go a phenomenal amount every year. So, yeah, to try and even remotely achieve or see these incredible countries and catch carp from so many places, I'm just going to always try and go to as many different places as possible for the experience.
I want to try and get out to the old Afghanistan, mate, where my sort of heritage is from. There's got to be some there, hasn't there?
Yeah, so I remember, this is a few years back now, 4, 5, 6 years ago, Kirsten Wiley, good friend, ex-special forces.
Yeah.
And there was a magazine, Carp Addict. I think him, and maybe not him, but I think it was Johnny Bannister was the editor of it. Really cool magazine. You don't remember it?
No, I don't remember at all.
I'm certain it was called Carp Addict. It was definitely around for 2 or 3 years. And I remember Kirsten wrote a series of articles in there, and it was your classic sort of desert sandstorm camo. He's a big guy, man, with the big guns, like with big trucks. But they're catching carp, on tours. And I also spoke with Jakob Wagner 2 years ago. And again, I don't want to say too much. It's not my place to say, but I know he has been traveling alone into these kind of countries. Very, very scary listening to him. And he took with him nothing other than his fishing tackle, some clothes, big drive from where he lives in the Czech Republic, big drive. And he was living there for weeks and weeks on end, and luckily befriended some of the locals. And all he had to prove who he was a small photo album with fish from all around the world, which was kind of his like, please don't shoot me or kill me. I'm just here to catch your incredible fish. And he told me stories of ridiculous carp, like ridiculous, and barbel. Barbel was bigger than I can stretch my arms. So you wouldn't think of like your Iraqs and your Irans, but you've got the climate. You've got a climate, you've got a long season for them to feed. It's so exciting. It's giving me goosebumps thinking about it, man, because there is so many
possibilities.
Yeah, man.
It's endless, mate. Too many carp, too many places, not enough time.
Well, that's what we all find ourselves in, that position, and I'm sure these guys do too.
Blair, you've been an absolute legend, mate. I'm going to get Briggsy in, mate. Before you go, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
And you've definitely whetted my appetite for getting out there on a bit of adventure, hopefully in the not too distant future.
Yeah, big ups.
Steve Briggs, welcome to the podcast, and thank you for coming in, mate. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, and thanks for having me down here. I was saying a little while ago, I've looked forward to coming down and sitting here with you. It's the first time, isn't it? We've sat down and talked.
He says that to all the boys, doesn't he, Steve?
No, but I've been looking forward to it, and it's nice to be here.
Mate, thank you. Yeah, I think we've done a little bit on a live over lockdown, but apart from that, this is the first time I've sat in the flesh with you, mate. So I'm very much looking forward to it. It's a privilege, mate, and an honour.
Well, I mean, it's nice to be back down here, and there's people milling about. And last time I come down here, it was like a ghost town in here, because of all what's been going on. And don't want to get into that at all because I'm sick to death of it. And it's, it feels normal down here, which is great. I love it.
Yeah, nice, mate.
So very good to be here.
We're going to talk through what is a Bible of incredible carp captures, and each one has its own story, but essentially 15 £50 plus fish from 15 separate countries. Talk to me, in essence, about what that means to you when you see it on paper.
It's still hard to believe that I've actually gone around all those countries and done it, because it's when I look at it, it seems it's quite a lot, but it's just happened over such a long period of time and built up and up and up. I'm very proud of it. Do you know what I mean? I am very proud, to be able to say that you're the first person in the world to do something. Not many people get the chance to do that. So it's something I am proud of, and there's plenty more out there to do, obviously. And there's not many people up there. There's one guy, a friend of mine, Christoph Kuderman. He's not far behind me, and I know he would love to overtake me. So there's always that motivation. Sometimes I need a bit of motivation to spur me on, and he was one of the guys that spurred me on to keep going and keep trying different countries. So so the job's not done, I'm quite sort of pleased that I've caught all them 50s.
So you should be, mate. There's some incredible stories in there, not just captures of amazing fish, but the backstories to them. And when we were planning this, you sent me through what is a dossier. It's like the Magna Carta of mega carp, and the little story around them all. And it's brilliant. I'm very much looking forward to it. What I wanted to get before we delved into sort of number 1 of 15 is, for you, I know you've become synonymous with continental carping, if you like, over the course of your carping history. You have been doing it very recently to very good effect in the Colne Valley. But where did that sense of travel, adventure, and pioneering, I'm going to say that because you started on a lot of these venues, you were the first to go there or one of the first group to go there. Where did that all come from?
That's a really good question, actually. And, I'm not sure if I really know because it wasn't in my family. My mum and dad, they were very much non-travellers. If we had a holiday, we never went abroad or anything like that. It was, if we had a holiday, it was in a caravan down the coast. That was as far as we got, really. So it certainly wasn't from them. And I'm not really an outgoing person. Do you know what I mean? I'm not one of those guys who wants to go out and meet loads of people. Joan is, but I started travelling before I met Joan. So I don't know. It's just, basically, when I first went abroad, Cassien was the first place I went to, and it was just the lure of those big fish and the sunshine. But at the time, I really thought that I would just go there and do it, say that I'd been, and then carry on with me sort of UK local fishing. But when I went, I sort of got there and I came home and I loved it. I fell in love with it. And I suppose that was the start of it, and when I loved Cassien, I thought there was going to be loads more Cassiens and adventures, and of course there is. There's adventures all over the world. So, yeah, Cassien was the seed, I suppose, that started growing everything else. I just fell in love with the adventure, the travel, the sunshine, the sandy beaches, and the freedom. That was the thing, because I've noticed it even going back to the Colne Valley this year. There's so many rules and regulations. Even when there's no one on the lake, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't fish out of your boundary. And like you go to Cassien and you've got 1,000 acres to do what you want with, and that's what I loved. So, yeah, I guess a lot of it came from that. It was the freedom.
Yeah,
I loved the freedom.
Nice. Now, you talked a little bit about Cassien, and obviously there's been an awful lot of brilliant video and preceding podcasts to this. So you've done a couple of podcasts with Dan and Alfie, season 1. You did one just before I sort of took over as well. That was based purely on Cassien with Jane.
Yeah.
And you did one before that. You've also got a brilliant video put together by Ollie and Lou Porter when he was here about your history on Cassien. And it's fair to say that sort of as a chapter with regards to the venue, you've pretty much not put it on the map, but it was always on the map. But in terms of your time on there, you've done a lot of time, caught a lot of mega fish. And if I was to go to Cassien tomorrow, you'd definitely be one of my first texts, mate. But talk to me about, because that is the scene of your first 50-pounder. Talk to me about that and how that all unfolded.
Yeah, well, the previous year, which was 1985, that's when I'd been abroad for the very first time. Me yellow Mark III Cortina had gone down to Cassien, and like I say, it was going to be my only trip, but I fell in love with the place. And at the time, I was fishing Darrant flakes, and the guy I was fishing with, Pete Noonan, at the time, he'd never been abroad or anything like that. But I took, the first thing I did was race down to Darrant, showed him all the pictures, and I said, "You've got to go there. We've got to go there next year. You've got to have a trip. It's amazing." And excuse me. And he said, "Yeah, all right. I've got a minivan. We go in my minivan. It's all souped up engine, 1275 engine or something." The van, it was a nightmare, but come to that. So we arranged the following May to go down there in Pete's minivan. He wasn't sure about it at all. It was such a big adventure. It was a big adventure in those days. I know we touched on it with Alfie last time that, there was no internet or sat-navs or anything. It was just a map. And, what we had was very basic then. And Pete, the very evening we was going to go, Pete turned up, and we sort of managed to get all our gear in there. I mean, it was literally a little minivan. It was tiny when I think of it now. But we got our gear in there, And then he handed me a big screwdriver. And I thought, what's that for? And he said, well, you have to hold the front of the starter motor on from through the grill at the front to start the engine. So, and literally every time we had to start the engine, I had to do this wherever we were. And that was the start of it, and I thought, oh no. And I'd advised him, in those days you could get AA 5-star cover, which was, you wanted to be covered. Well, Pete, he was a great angler and all that, but he was as tight as anything. So he never got the 5-star cover or anything. And before we'd even got to Paris, the fan belt had snapped. And we had to get towed into a garage and get a new fan belt. And that was like an overnight stop. And that was the start of the problems with the van. It constantly overheated all the way down. So we was flagging down lorries so we run out of water and everything. We was flagging down lorries and cars to get water off them. And in the end, we undid the radiator cap so many times that the top actually snapped off, literally snapped off. So that was another trip to the garage and they brazed it on. But it got us there. Do you know what I mean? It did get us there. And because I'd been there once and I'd fished up the North Arm, and that was brilliant. It was brilliant. I loved the North Arm. It was big and it was open and I loved that expanse of water. But this trip was in May. So I had it in mind that the fish were going to be sort of heading towards the spawning areas down the West Arm. And normally every year, the spawning bay was closed. Now they close the whole of the West Arm every year. But we got there and we started fishing up the top end of the West Arm because I'd seen some German guys that had a couple of good fish there the year before. Anyway, 3 days in, we caught nothing, absolutely nothing. And one day, this little boat came up and an English guy was in it, and he sort of shouted across, you caught anything? And I was, nothing, I haven't seen anything. He said, I've had a couple of sort of low 20-pound commons down in the spawning bay. He said, the spawning bay's open. I thought, hey, open? Oh. He said, yeah, for some reason, it's open this year, for whatever reason, they haven't closed it. So I thought, oh, right. The main thing was he'd caught 2 fish. So the first thing we did, as soon as he'd gone, got in the boat, rowed down to have a look, and there was no one there, absolutely no one there. And there's this huge bay, no anglers, and he caught 2 fish, so we moved down there straight away. And it was quite strange because all I knew about Cassien, it was very deep. Normally, where I'd fished at the North Farm, well, the spawning bay was very shallow. We went out all around. It was only 3 foot deep. And you could see all around. There was nothing there. Do you know what I mean? You could see the bottom and you think, I don't know about this. But, he'd caught a couple of fish down there, so it had to be worth a go. So we set up anyway. And it was my first experience of fishing a lake with crayfish. The previous year I'd taken sort of normal boilies, what I use, and they all got annihilated by the crayfish. So we ended up using peanuts, which worked well. But for this trip, I'd sort of planned to make some really big, hard hook baits. I'd never used big hook baits before, 14, 15 mils were sort of top whack for Darrant, for whatever.
Yeah. But
we rolled up these Scopex, they were, and, probably 30 mil hook baits, something like that, which were like
donkey chokers.
Yeah, donkey chokers in those days. With a view to sort of, combating the crayfish or whatever, which they did perfectly, actually. So, big leads for those days were I suppose a 4-ounce lead was huge in those days, and these big baits, we was never going to cast them out because of the gear we had in those days. My rods back then were 11 foot 1 3/4. And for sort of tackling Cassien, I was never going to cast out these big things. So it was the first experience of rowing baits out, if you like. So, one of us would stand on the bank with the rods, and the other one would row out to the reed beds basically on the far side of this bay.
How were you with the rowing? Like first time in a boat and mastering it? I was terrible, mate. Took me a long time.
Actually.
Were you?
Yeah, I was okay. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, probably I'd done it a couple of times when I was a kid, you know, on park lakes or whatever. But it was okay. Yeah, I never had any problems. Like, I remember going with Joan, and to this day, she has trouble rowing a boat. She goes around in circles, basically. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I was always okay in boats. Always felt quite sort of natural in a boat.
Right.
And I've always enjoyed the boat side of fishing. You know, I've always enjoyed that, being out on the lake, and you see so much from a boat. You know, there's so much you can see from a boat that you don't see from the bank. And yeah, I enjoyed that side of it. I love that side of it. So yeah, that was another part of it. But that was the first time I'd ever done it, actually taking the baits out in that way. Yeah, and you know, just that presentation you get. But I do remember that it felt weird going out to those reed beds where it was like 3 foot deep, nothing there, and you're baiting up thinking, are we going to get anything here? Do you know? Well, you know, I did. The first night I had a 28 pound mirror, put it in the sack, and it got out the sack in the, you know, before the morning, it was gone. You know, so
dodgy Nash Carp sack, was it?
You know, I forget whose sack it was. It was one of those with, you know, the drawstring, you pull it up, and the little plastic tag. You know, I guess I hadn't used, most of the places I fished, we weren't allowed to use sacks, so I didn't use them. In the end, you learnt that you had to tie a knot round the top. But yeah, I was gutted. You know, first fish, and I thought it might be the only fish. Yeah, it was gone in the morning. So yeah, that was really disappointing. So, but what can you do? You know, at least I caught one, I suppose. Yeah. But the main thing was, you know, like from not seeing anything, obviously fish were going in there. And so the next night, you know, got the rods all back in position and all that. And it was probably, I don't know, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, something like that. It's gone off. And, you know, even though it's only little 1 3/4 rods, like hook this fish and it's coming away from the reeds all right. And we got in the boat, me and Pete got in the boat because we was worried about it kiting through other lines more than anything else. You know, it's quite shallow. And the last thing we wanted to do was wipe out all the other rods. And just remember this fish rolling on the top in the darkness, and it was like really deep. You know, I'd never heard a fish sound like that. And Pete said, that sounds like a good one. And I thought, blimey, yeah. And I can't remember, I mean, it was a plodding fight, you know, but I mean, in the fairly shallow water, it wasn't a long fight. Just remember getting this fish in the net and not really realising what we'd got at the time. So we got back to the bank, and, you know, it's that old story, you know, I was thinking 40 pound. I'd caught a 40 on the previous trip, and I was thinking it's got to be around that sort of size, you know, bearing in mind there was no torches or anything like that because there was no night fishing on Cassien. So, you know, everything.
Stealth.
Stealth, basically. And, you know, people always tell you those stories. I went to lift it out and I thought the net was snagged. And, yeah, it was a weird feeling because, you know, I went to lift it and it didn't move, sort of thing. And I needed that extra, bloody hell. And then we put it on the bank, and I thought, you know, it just looked like there was carp everywhere. You know, it was just so big. I've never seen anything like it. It was just so big. Yeah, it was unbelievable.
What was the biggest fish you'd sort of seen before that? You've had your 40 the previous session. Was that the biggest one?
That was it, basically. Yeah, a German guy had caught a 45. My one was 43.5. So they were the biggest fish I'd seen. And this one, I thought, well, that's just much bigger than them, sort of thing. You know, it's just huge. It really was huge. But, you know, whether it's a premonition, you know, you remember they were the big happy hooker scales, I suppose, the ones that went up to, what did they go up to? £112, I think. You know, they did £60. I think it was £60 or 56, might have been 56 or 112. And I bought them just for that trip. And I bought the 112 ones. And I remember the guy in the shop saying, "Blimey, you're open a bit. What, you know, what's wrong with 56?"
We don't sell many of these, boys.
And you know, it's just as well because the 56s weren't enough. It was 61 and a half. Yeah, and you know, like second trip away when I've only ever caught 140 in my life, and a 30. You know, I've had a handful of 30s in England, and here's one like twice the size, and it was just humongous. It really was. It was huge. It blew me away. And Pete as well. You know, I remember Pete was just looking at that and he said, "God, I want one of those. I really want one of those." Because he had a £24 mirror that night.
Right.
You know, so he caught his first one, £24. He said, "God, I want one of those."
How does, in terms of what you knew about Cassien, being your second trip, that being a 60-pounder, had you heard of fish that big there, or was it a case of 40s and 50s
absolutely.
being top end?
No, that was the year. Where are we? 87. The previous year was when Kevin Ellis caught
was
his
that Ellis? Right,
76
okay.
pounds. So, and that was the fish that really nailed on that I was going to go there. When I saw that fish, I thought, I've got to go there. You know, that picture of him, you know, because he was such a little guy, and it's such an iconic picture, isn't it? You know, it really is. And I just wanted some of that. And, you know, the guys that I was fishing with around the Darrant Valley, there was loads of them. I've known them years, and a lot of them said, "Yeah, but that's not real fishing. You know, they're freaks. They're not like real carp." Because I can understand what they meant, because it was so outside of what everyone knew. You know, we'd done all our fishing all our lives in lakes where 30-pound was top whack. If you got a 30-pounder, that was the biggest fish in the valley, a 30-pounder. And here was a fish like nearly 80 pounds, 76 pounds. They couldn't comprehend it, whereas I looked at it and thought, "God, I want some of that."
Yeah, get me there.
Yeah, get me there. But as it turned out, it was a lot more than just it was the fish that got me out there, and the pictures of the blue skies and the sand and all that. But when I got there, really, it was you've got to go to Cassien to understand the atmosphere that you've got on Cassien. And it's the full package. You know, people have often said to me, you know, "What is it about Cassien?" And I'll always say, really, you've got to go there to understand it. It's not something you can describe, but when you go there and you catch, you know, it's quite, if you blank, it's not quite the same. It never is. But when you catch one, you get it. You know, you get the atmosphere, the surroundings, where it is. You know, it's in such a lovely part of the world, you know, between Saint-Tropez and Nice and Monaco. It's millionaire's playground. But, you know, when you go there, you can understand why they all want to live down there, because it's such a beautiful part of the world. And it's loads of big carp there, that
is an awesome start. In 2 sessions to have a 40 and then a 60. I mean,
yeah, it was dream stuff, really.
No wonder the love affair, a lifelong love affair with the place started. Incredible.
I mean, well, to finish, before we finish, I mean, Pete said he wanted one. So I said to him, all I can do, I said, my trip's made, obviously. All I can do is take your rod out and I'll drop it exactly where I had that 60 from. And, you know, the spot's yours.
Still up against the reed line where you were fishing before?
Yeah, exactly the same spot. And next morning he had a 54 on that rod.
Wicked.
So, yeah, it was job done for both of us. You know, it was teamwork. Obviously, trips away are always teamwork. If they're not, then they go wrong. Do you know what I mean? And there's plenty go wrong. But yeah, that minivan.
I was going to say, that is karma, isn't it? For surviving the minivan trip down, you deserve a couple of results.
Well, the trip home was a lot worse. It took us 5 days to get home. It literally fell to bits, the van. It started jumping like a kangaroo, and the fuel gauge was, we could watch it going down, and it was shaking that much, the van, that it ripped the exhaust pipe off the brackets, actually broke the brackets, and the exhaust pipe went through the petrol tank. So we blocked that up with a rod sleeve. And
days.
And yeah, I mean, well, we had to push it off the ferry. We got stuck in Calais for a couple of days. We thought that's it, it's dead. In the end, it would only go at full speed in second gear. That was the only way we could keep the engine running. And it was filling up with smoke, so we had to have the windows open all the way. We got to my house, and the exhaust pipe fell off completely at the end of the road. We had to go back and pick it up. And it never went again, the van.
Is that it?
Literally pulled up outside my house, and he got it towed away eventually. It never went again. But he got us there.
There was a carp fishing museum. That car should be in it, mate. I think. Or minivan, should I say.
Definitely shouldn't be on the road, put it that way.
From that starting point and your first 50, at this point, I'm guessing you're just happy travelling. There's no thought in your mind with regards to racking up 50s from different places, or was there?
Well, no, not in those days, because Cassien was the only lake we knew of, really. It's amazing, really, that, you know, when you think of driving down through France, all those waters we were going past in those days, but we just didn't know they were there. And probably the carp weren't that big, or they were just getting going really as well. You know, Cassien was already there, and in those days, and we just didn't know. I had a trip to Holland in 88, I think it was. We met a couple of guys actually on Cassien and went to Holland, but it was just a trip. You know, I mean, I'd never caught a 20-pound common, and everyone went to Holland to catch a 20-pound common, and I did. I caught a 20-pound common in Holland. You know, so that was how the fishing was.
Crazy
back then. Yeah, it wasn't. Big fish were just a dream, but they were only in Cassien at the time.
Yeah.
So there wasn't this mad adventure to go out and catch loads of big fish from loads of different waters then, because I didn't know they existed back then, you know, or they didn't exist. So it was, it was just a yearly trip to Cassien, if anything, you know, a summer trip to Cassien. It was like a summer holiday, you know, it's sunshine, it was the south of France, and there were big carp, so...
Living the dream.
That was it in those days, yeah.
And that's 1987, so, yeah, I'm 2, mate. I'm in my nappies there when you've caught that. 50
yeah, cheers for that.
No, but impressive, mate. That is impressive. And then in terms of your next 50, if you like, impressive location, but you're talking... What, 1990s, end of 90s, the next one? Got it in my notes here, 99.
Was that when it was? Yeah. So there was quite a gap in between, you know, and I suppose they were the Cassien years because I didn't know any different. But yeah, the second one just came about because I remember seeing these brochures, and a lot of it was to do with Croatia as well. Croatia was, you know, obviously a big part of carp talk.
Yeah.
And, you know, the advertising for various waters, you know, things were starting to happen. Waters were being discovered all the time, and different locations, different countries. And one that cropped up was South Africa. And, you know, I saw these pictures, and, you know, there was a big glossy brochure that came from there. African Gold was the company that was trying, you know, doing holidays out there basically. And it sort of said, you know, fish for big carp and go and see the big 5, you know, in Kruger Park, you know, the leopards, the lions and the buffalo, you know. And it just looked something fantastic, but something I was never going to do. You know, I mean, I couldn't afford anything sort of remotely touching anything like that, a trip to South Africa. But they wanted advertising, you know, and they wanted promotion. And Crowe got in touch one day, and he said, you know, we're setting up a promotional trip to South Africa, you know, to Klaserie Dam. Do you want to be a part of that? I thought, well, I just said yes.
Yeah.
It didn't even take a second. It's like, yeah, too right, I do. Yeah. And it's like, well, there's a group of us going. There was me, Simon, Rob Hughes. There was Xavier Palazzi, who was part of the Hutchinson team in those days, French guy. Glyn Leach, who was editor of Boxing Monthly at the time.
Boxing Monthly, wow.
Yeah, but he was a carp angler as well. So, Sandy Hoff, who was from Cheshire, he was just part of our group, really, but he, we just all got together and went out there, so, yeah, I remember this great big long plane journey, it was 11 hours or something, and, video games. It was great, another great adventure. And we met up with Martin Davidson, who was a real character in it. So, I mean, what he's done in his life is amazing. He's an amazing guy and really funny, really real character. So we stayed at his place at this lodge. God, it was unbelievable, lovely swimming pool and everything. And just, you got very much the feeling that you were in South Africa. There was animals and eagles flying around and things like that. And he said, "Oh, don't worry about that. You wait till you get to the lake." And it was a long drive up to the lake. We drove up to Cassierie Dam, which was probably about 4-hour drive, 5-hour drive. When we got there, it was just, you had to go through a barrier to get in, because it was actually a nature reserve where we were going to fish that had only just been opened up. We were literally the first people that were allowed in to fish this half of the lake. Okay. It had always been shut to the public, and a nature reserve. So as you imagine, a nature reserve is for all the wildlife.
I mean, a nature reserve in the UK is all right. You might see a few buzzards or a peregrine falcon or an osprey if you're lucky, but a nature reserve in South Africa, I think I'd be a bit more, apprehensive.
Well, it sort of, it speaks for itself, really. So, we were in the old nature reserve, and it was everything you think it's going to be, really. We pulled up in the bush camp, and there was these big stones around in a circle. That was the bush camp fire, and straight away, you could see monkeys, baboons up in the trees, and there was a lot of wildlife around. It was still fairly wild, big spiders, these orb spinner spiders that were the size of your hand, and the webs would be hitting your face as you walk through the bushes. And we sort of did a draw for swims. And I wanted to be out in the wilds a bit. So I remember Crowe and Rob, they were fishing together, Rob Hughes, and I think they came out first, and they chose the bush camp swim, which, I thought, well, I wouldn't want that. I want to be sort of out under the trees, and so I fished with Sandy Hoff, and we went a bit further up. It was a new swim that had just been made, and that appealed to us. Dug out big channel through these big tall rushes, and you're sort of fishing across to the far side. There was a big long channel that was probably 150 yards wide, and the bush camp swim was sort of the last one. That sort of to the right of that was like the inlet, if you like. So it was, fairly tough. I mean, the first few days we didn't. Remember, Sandy caught a 30-pound mirror, I think. But what happened? It was unusual for Africa at that time, South Africa, but they started getting quite a lot of rain,
right?
And the inlet stream started to sort of build up quite a bit. So there was quite a bit of water coming in there, and the fish seemed to head for that, like they would, fresh water. And Rob and Simon started to get a lot of fish in the bush camp swim. It was definitely where most of them were heading. And so, we carried on struggling away. I moved to a point area, which was really nice. There was Xavier Me and Sandy all fish around this point. And me and Xavier both caught fish. So we both caught our first African carp from there. You know, mine was 21 pound. I think his was 27.
Tactically, was it all boat work and because boilie also, like, they're new fish, as in they've not really been fished for, have they? So was it that approach, or was there maize particle used, or how did you go about it?
Very good question, that, actually, because it was all boat work.
Yeah.
You know, it was a typical. It wasn't a massive place like Cassien, but it was still like 400-500 acres, something like that, from memory. But there were two things. They had boilies there for us to use. We couldn't take anything with us. It was, but there was two big problems in the lake. One was catfish. There was loads of catfish. Never had a problem. There weren't any in Cassien at the time. And if you put boilies there, you got these. They're like, well, they're South African catfish. They're, I don't know. Well, they're their own species. Not very big. You know, 10, 15, 20 pound was a big one.
Okay.
But if you put boilies out, you got them. The other problem was freshwater crabs,
Right.
which I'd never seen, but the South African waters all seem to have them. And, you know, I thought crayfish were a problem. These were crabs, just like you see in the sea. You know, you get one out, it's just a crab, but they lived in fresh water.
What, like eating-sized crabs or little ones?
Up to about 6 inches across was the
Right.
biggest I've seen, but they'd snip through your line, you know, and things like that. They were real problem, and boilies were just, you know, impossible to use basically with them and the catfish. So it was tiger nuts, you know, and thankfully out there they had a good supply of tiger nuts, and Norman, who was like the main guide, he was on the lake all the time. He was brilliant. He was absolutely brilliant. You know, he'd cook the meals and all that, and he had these great big tubs, and he'd boil up the tiger nuts. So, yeah, that's what we were using. But yeah, I mean, it was frustrating because there was one area that all the fish were coming out of, and you know, Crowie had caught the big mirror. I mean, we was all looking at pictures on the way out there, and there was this one mirror. It had just been caught the once, 56 pound or something. We looked at that, cool, that'd be nice. Crowie caught it anyway, 55 pound. And so he was made up, that was a PB for him and all that. And the rain kept coming, it was getting heavier and heavier. And towards the end of what should have been our week on there, we were due to have a day in the Kruger Park, you know, like everyone, you know, go and see the animals, photograph the animals. We're all desperate to do that anyway. So we went and had this day, and we saw the lions and the hyenas and all that. It was really good. Quite a gloomy day. Anyway, we got back sort of late evening into bush camp, and it was literally in flood. Like the water was up into the bivvies, and there was all sorts of trees and animals coming down this stream and all sorts. I mean, it looked totally different. And it was, I think the next day, literally, we were meant to be going. And Martin Davidson said to me, he said, look, he said, if you want to stay, you can stay. He said, there's no one here next week. If you want to stay on for another week, you're more than welcome. Well, everyone had to get back. You know, they had the flights booked and all that. And I thought, well, I'm staying.
You're too right, yeah.
And there was only one other guy that could stay, and that was Sandy Hoff. You know, so there was me and Sandy said, well, we can stay another week. And all the others. So the next morning, they've all got on the minibus to go, and we was like waving them off. And right, we'll get our gear and set up in bush camp then, shall we?
Yeah.
So that was what we did. You know, obviously, you know, so there was just me and Sandy and Norman and his wife. I forget her name now, but yeah, just us four. But it was lovely, absolutely lovely. And we knew we was going to catch. You know, I mean, the flood water was getting worse and worse. We had to move back a few times, but the fish were there, and so were the animals. Saying that, I mean, so, you know, I skipped over a few things. I mean, we woke up one morning, we could hear all this noise in the night, and you knew there was like an animal, something quite substantial around. We got out in the morning, and there was all these paw prints around the bivvy. And there was a local, he was the guy who took us to the Kruger Park, actually. He was...
Like a bushman.
Yeah, he was a bushman.
Yeah.
He lived in the area and he knew everything what was going on. And he said, oh, that's the leopard. He said, there's a female leopard here with a cub. And yeah, the tracks were all around our bivvy. And
Call my mum, tell her I'm coming home. I need to come home. There's a leopard outside. What is kicking off there, Steve?
there was all sorts. The baboons would get drunk in the afternoon on these ripe figs. There was a couple of fig trees, and they would eat all these ripe figs and end up fighting in the trees in the afternoon. There was porcupines, tortoise.
You love a bit of wildlife. I know you do. I've seen your videos about wild boar feeding and you and Joan watching them. But there's wildlife, and then there's that. There's hippos, crocodiles. There's all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
What were you ever scared?
No, I love all that.
Do you?
Yeah, I absolutely love all that. Oh yeah, stick me in the middle of a load of wild animals, I'm happy. Yeah.
Even hippos and crocodiles.
Yeah. No, I love all that. Well, the wild boar people. Yeah, I mean, Crowie didn't like the wild boar, to put it mildly.
I know he didn't, mate. Apparently he was crying like a little girl. I love Crowie. Crowie, please don't hate me for this. But apparently he was, less than happy, crying like a little girl, apparently, in your swim, wasn't he?
Well, I bet not. He probably watched it, so...
Well done, Briggsy. Sorry, Crowie.
No, he didn't, but he didn't like him, put it that way.
He can run now, though, can't he? So he'd be able to get away from
Yeah,
him.
I think that's where it started.
We've got you.
But no, I just wanted to be amongst them, so I was out the gate hand feeding them. And animals, I generally find animals are fine if they know you're all right, if you're not scared of them. And, as long as you can't just go up to a lion and expect to stroke it, it's going to eat you. But, so you've got to be sensible. But, like wild boars, people say, oh, they kill you. And no, they don't. I've seen hundreds, probably thousands of wild boar now. I've never had a problem with any single one of them. So, but yeah, I mean, there were certainly things, you could hear the lions roaring at night. It was so atmospheric there. That was the thing about the bush camp swim. It was so atmospheric. You'd sit round and there was so much noise from like frogs, tree crickets, bush babies. You'd see these great big eyes reflecting in the tree where they'd be looking at you. But you could hear the lions roaring the other side of the lake, and not far away, you could clearly hear them. But it was all part of the atmosphere.
It sounds amazing. Truly amazing.
I was stepping over a python to get in the boat to go and play a fish one night. Said to Sandy, mind. He was just mind the python.
As you do.
Yeah. But we did start catching. Where the floods had come in, there was all sorts of stuff coming down the river. Literally, I mean, the swim would be full up every day with logs, bushes, few animals, and whatever. And it would take quite a bit of the day to actually clear the swim to get the rods out. So we'd get all the rods out, and we were sharing runs because it wasn't our gear. We'd do everything. We was using their gear, so we would just put all the rods out together and just sort of share the runs, run for run. But we started catching that night, and we first bite. I think Sandy had the first go. He had a 28 mirror, I think. Next one to go was the big mirror again, the one that Crowie. It had only ever been caught once before. Crowie had caught it. Literally, he was probably just getting on the plane, and I caught it.
What's the fight like from those in that water? Was it quite deep? Because I think dam, and I think relatively deep water, but I might be completely wrong.
Yeah, well, we was at the inlet.
Oh, of course
end.
You were.
I don't know how deep it was at the dam end, but yeah, would have been deeper, obviously. Yeah. Where we were, it was not 11 foot or something, something like that. So, yeah, the fight wasn't anything spectacular. It wasn't a hard fight or anything. It was just one of those sort of, this feels heavy sort of thing, and it come up, and yeah, no dramas. It was just the shock of seeing it, Blimey, that's that. We recognised it straight away. I said, that's that one Simon had. it was the shock of seeing it again so soon afterwards.
But I think as a capture, I mean, obviously it's a massive fish, but the location, the fact that it is so sort of out there and different. It's not every day you knock around with lions and your buzz bars out. Do you know what I mean? It's it's an incredible chapter.
It was an amazing place. It really was. And it was one of those places you had to be there early, you know, because once you got loads of people going to and fro every week, the animals were gone, obviously. You know what animals are like, you know, wild animals, they stay away from humans. So it was only going to be full of wildlife for a short time. And we was there at that time. You know, a leopard and a cub aren't going to come every week if it's full up with people, you know. And
no.
So, yeah, it was the right place at the right time. And an amazing adventure. And, you know, you speak to the guys, I'm sure Rob said it, I know Simon said it many a time, that it was their most amazing adventure any time, you know, through their life.
Yeah, too right. Number 3 for you in terms of over 50, you referenced it before, was Raduta. Now,
just grab me tea.
Of course, mate. Sorry, mate. I'm making you chat and ruining your tea.
That's all right.
I don't make many cups of tea for people either, so that is. But in terms of Raduta as a lake, obviously you said there with South Africa it's about timing, but you were in that sort of first wave of people that went on there. As a place, Romania as a country at the time, that's another quite different culture shock with regards to your general UK venues and fishing, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I think, well, it was such a big discovery. You know, it was a discovery that come about by chance when Robert Raduta or one of his workers caught this massive carp. You know, I mean, they knew there were carp in there. It was a flooded river system that got dammed. And in that system, there were some, carp farms, basically. There were some carp farms. And all the carp ended up in the lake, just where it got flooded. And it was, you know, that was all part of realising what Romania was like in those days, because there were villages in there and everything. And the villagers got 48 hours notice that the valley was being flooded. 48 hours.
Jeez.
Like now you'd get over here, it'd be like 10 or 20 years notice, you know, that 48 hours. So, yeah, I mean, the villages and everything was still in the lake, you know. I mean, jumping ahead, but you'd reel in sometimes and pull in picture frames and bicycle wheels, you know. It's literally, they just had to get out quick. So that was sort of what Romania was like. It was really like going back 100 or 200 years. It was so primitive, but such a buzz, because here was this lake that literally got sort of discovered out of nowhere. It only got discovered because Raduta or one of his men caught this 78-pound mirror, and it was a beautiful fish. Didn't mean nothing to them, so they just knocked it on the head and decided to have it set up and put in the hotel. And there was no one in Romania that could do that job, so they sent it to Austria to be set up. And the guy, the taxidermist, happened to know a carp angler, and he said, I've been sent this fish, you better come and have a look at this. And so that was how it, you know, got started. The Austrian obviously got in touch and said, well, you know, can we do some fishing there? And gradually it opened up. And it was only about a year or so later when we, you know, started to get on there. But yeah, it was a real eye opener, Romania. You know, just even the roads were terrible, and there was you couldn't work out which side of the road you drove on, because people were just weaving from one side to the other to avoid all the potholes and everything. So it was really very poor country, dangerous country.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's definitely got that sort of edge about it, especially at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very dangerous place. You know, we spoke to Robert Raduta a few times and said, well, there must be other lakes around here with big fish in as well. And he said, well, yeah, there will be. But he said, I can't guarantee your safety. You do well if you last a night or 2 nights on there.
Cost of a human life isn't much, was it, at the time?
No, life was very cheap out there. You had everything or you had nothing. There was no middle ground in Romania, and sort of probably 98% of the population had nothing. And there was a few people, Robert Raduta was one that had everything. He had gained got everything mainly for his services to tennis. He was the coach of Elina Stasi, and he was sort of given the hotel and the lake and all that. And it was a fantastic place. It was like you drove through Romania and sort of thought, what have we done here? And then you turn up at, and it was like an oasis in the desert, this hotel, this fantastic, almost looked like a palace, in the middle of sort of this desolation, really. It looked like, I don't want to speak bad of their country, because...
It's come a long way now, obviously, but at the time, as you say,
yeah, absolutely.
That's some contrast, isn't it?
Yeah, and the villagers sort of summed it up, really. There was villages. First time I fished there, we fished literally outside of one of the villages, and we were like a circus turning up, really. They had nothing. Their main toy was an old bicycle rim and a stick, which you sort of see pictures of kids doing over here like 300 years ago, 200 years ago and things like that. Well, that was their main, they didn't have anything. Or they would tie a frog on a bit of string and chase their mates around and try and whack them around the head with it. Poor old frogs. But, so when we turned up with like bite alarms and bivvies and boats, it was like a circus turning up. So they was round us every day. And, they never took anything. They were probably too scared, but... they'd never seen anything like it, literally. So we was sort of constant entertainment for them, really. But I do remember jumping ahead to when we left. And we'd sort of become quite friendly with a lot of these kids over there, and they were good kids, really. We tried to give them some money, and like it's Romanian money, whatever it was, and all that. What can we do with this? We give it to the kids. And he looked at it and they didn't even know what it was. So, it's like,
wow,
what's this? Because they lived their whole lives either off the land or bartering. Money, they didn't have money.
That's crazy, isn't it?
So that was Romania, yeah.
What year is this, Steve?
This was, when I first fished there was 97 or 98.
Okay.
I think it might have been 98. I think the first trip when Crowe did the promotional trip was 97. And then the first, 97. Yeah, it's around that period anyway. It was hard fishing. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't easy at all. The first trip I actually blanked. All I caught was grass carp.
Right.
Rob Marsh had a couple of small commons. There was a couple of decent fish out, but it was basically very hard fishing. I think the second trip I had 3 fish, but the biggest was like 27 pound or something. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't easy fishing, but it was the lure of those big commons because, in the world at the time, there wasn't big commons. I think I said before we started, there was one 30-kilo common in Europe, which was bulldozer in the Orient.
Yeah.
That was the only one. And in Raduta, there was like half a dozen. So it was a big draw. But it was 2,500 acres, and tough fishing. So it was, it was tough fishing, and it was tough sort of for us to fish it, if you like.
Okay, talk to me about that. In what way?
Well, there was quite a few trips for the Austrians, Germans, and they had a big advantage over us because they could drive there. So they could take all their gear and all their bait. These were the first trips that we had sort of flown to, and we had a 30 kilo allowance, and that was for everything. You could have a bucket of maize every day on the lake, which sounded all right, but of course there's loads of grass carp in there, and so that's what you was getting. What you wanted was a load of boilies, and you couldn't do it. A 30 kilo allowance for everything. You had to take the whole. You was given a bed chair out there, and eventually a bivvy, but otherwise we had to take everything. So we could take like 3 or 4 kilos of boilies. So it was really up against it, fishing wise. It was only when Rob Hughes eventually started getting the organisation really sorted and sending pallets of boilies out in advance, that was when we really felt like we started fishing properly, effectively, and that made a lot of difference. Don't get me wrong, we was really keen to go. We wanted to be there, wanted to fish there, but it was a while before it was, it felt like we was fishing properly, if you like. So,
did you move around a lot with regards to having limited bait and try and get on fish, or were you sort of stuck in a certain area regardless?
We did move about. It was difficult sometimes because the way Robert Raduta wanted you to fish was to stay in one place, because basically they brought you meals. Part of the package was 2 meals a day. You had a breakfast package and an evening meal, and that was brought around the lake by speedboat. So he wanted you basically to stay in a place so the speedboat knew where, if all of a sudden they turned up and, oh no, he's moved a mile up the, you can imagine they didn't really want that. So you could move if you sort of let them know where you were going to and all that. But it wasn't that easy. Some guys just moved and said, no, I've paid a lot of money, I'm doing whatever.
Yeah.
Rob Marsh was one of them. I remember on his, the second trip, he said, no, I've paid a lot of money, I'm fishing where I want to fish. And he did. And he caught a 60-pounder. So fair
Cool,
play.
Marshy.
And, and that was also the first time where like numbers of 50s from different countries started to come into it, because, I'd caught the African one and I'd caught the Cassien one. Well, I think Rob had one from England and he'd had one from France, from Chanticoq. And now he'd caught a Romanian one.
Romanian one, yeah.
So he said, I've had £50 carp from 3 countries. And I thought, I've had them from 2. And, and it was like, oh, blimey. I fancy sort of like getting 3 myself, catching up sort of thing, because that was it in those days. No one had sort of been around that many countries full stop. So, yeah, it was my aim to get a Raduta 50, if you like. So, yeah, that was the first time there was like talk of how many 50s you had from different countries, sort of thing. So,
a bit of competitive Briggsy nature kicked in.
Yeah.
I like that. Talk me through the fish then. The all-important third one on the list.
Yeah, I suppose it came later on, which was why I got mixed up between the two, the South African and the Romanian one, because I actually fished Raduta first, but the 50 actually came. It was 2001, and I was lucky to be on the trip. So I'd had skin cancer, which was one of these things you get if you're not careful, being out in the sun in the south of France, burning yourself to get a suntan.
I didn't know you had skin cancer.
Yeah. 2001. Yeah, I got skin cancer, and it was a melanoma on my back, and I had to have an operation to take a great big lump out of my back. Anyway, this was on the Wednesday, I think it was, before I was due to go on the Friday. And I said to him, will I be able to fly? No, you can't fly. You've got to like recuperate and all that. And I thought, well, by then I was more friendly with Rob and Simon. I was sort of leading the group out there, and I thought, well, I've got to go. You know, there's no question. I want to go anyway. So I said, well, no, it's fine. I said, you know, I haven't got to do anything. I said, all these guys, they're all going to set up all my gear, you know, and all I've got to do is sit there. And they said, well, as long as you're not doing anything, you can go. So, right, that's it.
You blagged the hospital.
Yeah, so I've got, I mean, a great big thing, all stitches in my back and everything. But yeah, I was on the plane. You know, that was all that mattered. I was going, all I could, never mind a life-saving operation, all I could think about was catching a 50 from Raduta.
Really? Is that God's honest truth?
Yeah,
you weren't at all
absolutely.
apprehensive, scared, worried about your life, all of that stuff? That didn't take precedence. It was about catching a 50.
About catching a 50, yeah. It was.
Go on, Briggsy.
Yeah, I mean, it might sound a bit weird or a bit sad to say that, but that was all I was thinking of.
I said it to you at the start of this interview, didn't I? I said, I've been fortunate to have some incredible guests on this podcast, and the one thing that sets them apart, like yourself, is just an incredible mindset for whatever it is that they do, and that shows it there when you're faced with life and death for a 50-pounder.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, I mean, it seems a bit weird even saying it like all these years later, but yeah, you know, just get that done, and I want to get on the plane sort of thing.
Incredible.
And yeah, I was fishing with a guy who I used to do a bit of work with, Paul Sanders. Good guy he was. You know, he's gone now, unfortunately. You know, he's dead now. But we decided to fish in the Gypsy Village because the swim that was sort of allocated to us was the Shepherd's Cottage across the other side of this huge bay. It was the biggest open area on the lake. But the Shepherd's Cottage was known as an action area. And I said, you know, one thing I can't really have is loads of action. I said, I can't be up and down all night with it, you know, I just can't do it. So I was being a little bit sensible. So I said, we go down the other end in the Gypsy Village, which looked nice anyway. The wind was blowing in there. And it looked bang on for it. And there was one little spot out to the right. I'd fished the same area with another old friend, Pete Jones. And he'd fished on the right, and we found this lovely little, it was a plateau out there, but there was like a little bit that jutted out off it. And I said, God, it looks just like a great big dinner plate. And he never put a bait there, he never put a rod there. And I thought, well, if I ever get the chance and go back, I'm going to have a rod on that spot. And so sure enough, I'm back in that swim. I'm on the right-hand side, and I thought, right, I'm having a rod there. So, yeah, conditions were perfect. Wind was blowing in, overcast, drizzly, perfect. First morning, still hard. You know, one bite a day I was getting. First morning, 40-pound common. You know, still great fishing this day. 41 pound it was. Second morning, 45-pound common. And
all off this spot?
All on this rod, on the dinner plate, yeah. Yeah, nothing on the other rods. Maybe an odd little one or something, but this was the rod, you know. And it's funny how you get things in your head, you know, like might have been a year or two later when I thought if I ever fish, that's where I'm going to fish, if I fish that swim again. Anyway, third morning, again, it was blowing in, and it was one of those mornings where I was awake looking out, but I didn't want to get up because it was quite chilly and it was drizzly and it was all blowing in, but it was just quite nice. And out the corner of my eye, I just saw the rod tip go. It looked like that, and then it just gradually bent round and the alarm started going. Well, you know, Paul, who was next to me, he said, Briggs, you got to run? I said, yeah, I know, I'm out. And yeah, that was a proper battle. There was all sorts of snags, telegraph poles and bits of metal and girders. So I had to stand quite high on the bank to play this fish. And because I was up high, looking down, even though the water was murky, I saw this common roe and I thought, oh, that's a good one. You know, that is a good one. Yeah, and eventually Paul's down there with the net and netted it. And he said, well, I won't tell you what he said because he was, you know, he wasn't he was the most straightforward, straight up bloke in the world. He'd tell you exactly what he thought. Nicest bloke in the world, but so he just turned around and give me a load of it. That's bigger than all the others. And it was £53 common. So yeah, it was car.
Big commons as well. There's something about them, isn't there? I don't know if that's just me, but wow, mate.
Yeah, they're really impressive fish, aren't they? A big common. And I hadn't seen many at that time, so that was, if I was going to catch a £50 common, it was going to have to be there, really. There weren't anywhere else. There was no £50 commons in those days in Cassien or anywhere like that, so. And it was just in time as well, because literally the next day the sun came out and the wind dropped and the fish were gone.
Yeah.
That was it. The fish were gone. So it was just that one little period of the wind blowing in, that little dinner table.
Your name's on it.
Yeah, did the job, that little spot.
From Raduta to somewhere where, like, it's beautiful, and I think modern day times has been covered a fair bit, but Austria for the next one, mate.
Austria,
how did you get to Austria?
Well, a lot of these venues that I fished, it's an old saying, it's who you know, not what you know.
Yeah.
And it's definitely been like that. A lot of these waters, as you'll see already, through knowing Croatia at Carp Talk, we got to, well, both Romania and South Africa because of those promotional trips. Austria was a bit like that because we knew Kurt Grabmeyer, who, again, he's dead now, but one of the loveliest guys you'd ever meet, Kurt. Really, really nice guy. And he was Mr. Carp fishing in Austria. He was the first guy to organise a carp show. He had his own carp shop in Austria, and he also had a lake, outside of Vienna, the forest lake. It was literally in the middle of a forest. And so through business or whatever shows and whatever, we met Kurt and, became friendly. And he said, well, my lake's a syndicate lake, but he said, if you want, you can come over and fish it. I'll close it to the syndicate members and you can come and fish it for a week. Yep, okay. And so, yeah, that's what we did. I mean, Rob Hughes was meant to come, and he couldn't come for some reason. I think he had an appointment at the hairdressers or something.
Oi, Hughesy. I spent all that last week with Hughes. He's an absolute boy. But, he likes the hairdressers as much as me, mate.
No, I'm only joking, but he couldn't make it for some reason. So there was just me and Crowe and Rennie Hawkins.
Right.
Time. So, and Kurt, obviously.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was with Joan driving out, and Rennie and Crowe were going to come out together. And we looked at the drive, and they said, oh, it's about the same sort of distance as Cassien. Well, I looked at the map, and I thought, no, it looks at least half as much again. So I said, we're going to set out the day before and stop overnight. And Crowe said, well, no, we're just going to do it in one hit. So... Well, they couldn't do it in one hit. It was just too far. So we arrived basically a day early. Not a day early. We arrived on time. And they arrived a day late.
Yeah.
So Kurt put us in this swim. He said, well, you and Joan obviously fishing together. It's better if you had this like bigger double swim or whatever.
How big's a lake?
Well, it wasn't very big. What would it be? 12 acres, something like that.
Okay.
Deep. Very deep.
And stock-wise, what did you know? Well, you obviously know about the syndicate.
Yeah, it didn't have loads of fish, but it had some good fish. I know Bill Cotton, I know you had Bill in the other week, actually. He had fished there a couple of weeks before us. And he'd done all right. He'd caught quite a few fish. But none of the real big ones from memory. Up to about mid-40, still, lovely fish. But there was bigger ones than that in there. And yeah, I mean, it was good timing on our part, really. It was, winter arrives very quick in those sort of countries. You go from it doesn't really have an autumn. It goes from sort of late summer to winter overnight. And it was that week. But sometimes that's very good for the fishing. You know, those fish, all of a sudden it's a wake-up call, right, I've got to eat now, otherwise it's going to be frozen over and game over sort of thing. And it was that week, you know, we turned up in the sunshine and T-shirts, and within a few days it was freezing. But what I remember, Kurt, it's funny how people know their lake, and it's an old story that someone else will turn up and fish it totally different. But we had this swim, and there was a couple of plateaus out there, and he said, Kurt took us out and said, I'll show you these plateaus, I'll put markers on, you know, that's where the fish sort of tend to come from. And you could see why, you know, it's deep water, and then all of a sudden there's these lovely plateaus. But I do remember on the left-hand bank, we was on the end swim on one bank, and on the left-hand bank to our left, obviously, was out of bounds. And as we had a look along there were still weed beds, you could see these little areas glowing yellow. And said to Kurt, you know, what about those? He said, oh, you know, no one, you know, fishes there. They fish on the plateaus. So, right, okay. And I thought, well, I'm going to fish the plateaus because out of respect to Kurt, he's put us on these spots or whatever, so I'm going to fish them. But, you know, looking at these other spots sort of thing. Anyway, nothing happened. Crowie turned up with Rennie the next morning and just give me a dirty look because we had fished a night before him, sort of thing, even though it was his fault. But so he went in the end swim on the other bank.
Right.
And exactly the same thing. He went out with Kurt and, hold on, what's that big yellow spot there? And, you know, Crowie straight away, you know, fair play. He's very, very good at recognising and a spot and doing something about it. Instead, you know, he said, right, I'm just fishing there straight away. And, you know, and I thought, well, I've given it a night on the plateau. Nothing's happened. I'm fishing these spots as well. Straight away, as soon as I put one on one of these little yellow clay spots, caught a 25-pound mirror.
Literally as quick as that.
Yeah, within an hour or something. Yeah. So, you know, it wasn't rocket science, but then, you know, it's just sometimes you're tuned into those things and sometimes you look at carp fishing a different way, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is. That's why it's always good to have experience of all different places, because you never know where a carp's going to feed, or, you know, every situation is different.
Yeah.
But you know, we'd found these clay spots and, started catching them. Crowie was catching. Rennie was in the middle and he was struggling a bit more, but, you know, he got them in the end. But me and Crowie were catching, and there was one little tiny clay spot that I hadn't put a rod on, so I put a pop-up on that one, and sometime in the night it went off, and I got this fish and saw it in the head torque. It was just this massive long common, great big long common. And that was it. It was 55-12 or something. There was two big I've done Joan out of a story here, actually, as I've jumped ahead, because Joan, actually, there's two big commons in there, and Joan caught the other one at 51.
Did you brace them?
No, it was a day or two apart.
Right.
But yeah, Crowie actually caught them both, went back the next year and caught them both himself. Yeah. But yeah, Joan caught a 51 common, and then I had this one at 55.
Yours was bigger, Steve. Is that what you're saying? Just put that down there.
Well, I mean, I saw Crowie's head torch about half hour later. We were still up having a cup of tea or whatever. Saw Crowie go out and get one. And next morning I saw him pacing up and down the other bank. And I thought, he's had a good one. And, you know, he saw us up and the phone call come across. Have you had one? Well, yeah. Have you? He said, well, yeah. How big's yours? I said, 25 or something, you know, kilos. He said, I've had a 50, 51 mirror. I said, oh, right. Oh, okay. And when he came in, he said, 25. I said, yeah, kilos, not. kid stuff. But
Yeah.
still makes me smile a bit. But I mean, fair play. We both, well, we all had 50. Me, Joan, and Crowe all had a 50.
That's some trip, isn't it?
Yeah, it was the right time. You know, like I said, that crossover time from autumn to winter, and the big uns fed that week.
Yeah.
That's what it was. The big uns fed that week. And we just timed it right.
At this point, you're looking at my notes, 2006. Rig-wise, bait-wise, are you quite refined down to sort of what I'd expect you to use now with regards to snowmen rigs on the bottom? You said a pop-up there, it's a pop-up presentation, squid and the likes of in terms of bait, or are you sort of still at a stage where you're sort of finding your feet with regards to rigs and refining a method?
Yeah, that was a bit of a flash in the pan, the pop-up thing. I don't know why I used a pop-up. It worked, but it's quite rare, especially abroad, to use pop-up. So I have learned over time. I wouldn't say I learned a long time ago, because I've been fishing with guys this week and the last few weeks that are going through that stage of, if they're not catching, is it the rig? Is it the bait? And it's a horrible place to be, and it's a horrible. But we've all been there, and I've been there so many times, and you know, I've got past that stage where if I have a blank, I don't go out with a different rig and a different bait next time. You know, I've got a few rigs. I've got a pop-up rig, I've got a bottom bait rig, and I don't change them about too much. You know, a rig that works, well, my theory on rigs is that I tie up a rig with the thought that, will it land the biggest fish in the lake if I'm lucky enough to hook it? Not will it get me a bite? Because you get the bites anyway. A good bait is to me what gets me the bites. You know, if I stick scope it squid out in a lake, it's going to get me a bite because the fish want to eat it. So the rig has just got to land them.
Yeah.
You know, it's got to hook them and it's got to land them. So I don't mess about. You know, I've gone through all that stage of, if I haven't had a bite, I'm using the wrong rig. Nah, you know, if I'm not getting bites, I'm not on the fish or they're not feeding. So, yeah, you know, I've gradually learnt over time that those little clay spots, get them on there, you get the bites there. On the plateau, I was told to fish there all week, not catch anything. Nothing to do with the rig or the bait, just in the wrong place. Put it in the right place, all of a sudden you catch 50-pounders. So, you know.
Location.
Yeah. And I've been talking, literally 2 different people the last couple of weeks, both lovely people, good friends and all that, but they're going through that lack of confidence stage, you know, and it's a horrible place to be. But a good bait, nice strong rig, and carp fishing's in here. You know, it's not on a book or a manual. It's most of it's in here. So find a method you're confident with, and get it on in front of the fish, and you catch it. Yeah, carp fishing is a lot simpler than most people imagine it. It really is, but it's taken me all these years to realise it. That's the problem.
It's amazing. Like, there's a lot of similarities. I've spent a fair bit of time with Crowe. I've been very fortunate to go on the bank with him a number of occasions, and he's very much the same. Like, everyone goes through that sort of progression, but when you guys have had the experience and pedigree that you've got, as you say, it becomes overcomplicated with regards to everything you see around it. It goes back to simplicity and reliability, and as soon as you've got that, you got your confidence, your happy days. Do you know what I mean? You
look at all those guys who are catching lots of fish. You know, you got like the Darryl Pecks, Simon Crowe, you know, Terry Earn, Dave Lane, he's another one. They keep catching them year after year. You look at their rigs, and most of the time you think, is that it? If you didn't know better, you think, blimey, you know, I expected something out of, something to look a lot better. Most of the time it doesn't look that good. It's just effective, and it's in there.
100%. And the irony of it, they'll all have different rigs as well. They won't be the same rig, but like you say, they'll be reliable and they're confident and they're happy in terms of their approach and their mindset.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, you've got to find that inner confidence. What you're happy. It's such a hard thing to get to, hard stage to get to, because you've got to go through all that mind blowing stuff to come out the other side. But you know, it's a happy place when you get there.
Yeah,
you know, I'm very comfortable with my carp fishing now. You know, I fish more simply than I ever have done in my life, but I catch more carp and everywhere. You know, people say to me, "Oh, it's all right catching them carp abroad." You know, what about in England? You know, there's tricky fish in England, like they're different carp. You know.
I couldn't believe it when you said that to me, that you've had people say that you only drop rigs or you can't catch them in England. How do you take that, mate? Does that not, that must, I mean, I don't know, annoy you? Probably don't even care, but like, not got any nerves?
It would, no, it's with a pinch of salt because it's happened so much. You know, after a while you get to realise that people don't mean anything bad. Sometimes they do, but most of the time it's just a throwaway Facebook comment or something. But, you know, I can't win, put it that way, because when I was fishing abroad all the time, you know, people would come on and say, well, I've never seen you cast a rod. You know, why don't you have a cast? Because I've fished the most effective way I can, which is normally with a boat.
Yeah.
You know, if I need to cast, I can cast. I've been doing it all year, all my life.
Yeah, exactly.
But then, so, you know, then they say, don't you ever fish in England and all that? When are you going to fish in England? So this year I've been fishing in England all the time. And now I'm getting the messages, I'm missing your trips away and your, you know, video blogs. When are you going away again? So, you know, whatever I do, you know, I can't win. So, you know, at the end of the day, you just got to please yourself.
Yeah. Too right. You said there a little bit earlier, you said the word mind-blowing, and number 5 on your list, mate, if I go back, and I often get asked this question in terms of all the fish dead or alive you'd want to catch, the black mirror from the Mere is the one. Like,
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, it was the one. Yeah.
There's no words for it. I have no words for it. I've seen photos of it. I've had Jim on the sofa talking about it. I've had people who've tried for it and not caught it. But the context of the place, the beauty of that fish, all that combined, yeah, I mean, what a fish.
It was the ultimate, really. It was the ultimate.
Is it for you better than the Cassien fish? Better than...
Yeah. Really, it's head and shoulders above anything that I've ever caught. You know, absolutely. And I can really sit here and say that I'll never catch a better fish than that, because I can't imagine a situation. Because again, you know, like I spoke about Cassien, with the Mere, it wasn't just that fish, even though that fish is so epic, or was so epic. It was the situation around it, you know, the lake and the fishing situation. It was everything rolled into one on there. So, and it was, I mean, literally, like we've just been talking about, I'd been fishing away a lot, and I just thought, I want a UK challenge for a change. You know, I just want to, I felt like I needed a bit of serious UK fishing, you know, and that was right. I mean, you know, it's 7 miles from my doorstep to Mere. So
don't get much more serious than that, though, does it, mate?
Yeah, I don't know if I knew what I was taking on.
Really, I was going to say, yeah.
Because without a doubt, I mean, it's the hardest, I've said it many times, but it's the hardest thing physically and mentally I've ever done in my life. You know, physically, because there was only a handful of fish in there. And if you saw a fish jump at the other end, you know, I wanted to be on it. But getting from one end to the other on the Mere is, Jesus, it's a job and a half, you know, because it was just overgrown with brambles and fallen trees and stinging nettles and biting things. And to get through there with all your gear, it was a job and a half. And then you might get there and see a fish jump down the other end and do it, you know, it was always on the move. Obviously, mentally, you weren't even meant to be fishing there.
Yeah.
So it was always done undercover. You know, the only comfortable time really was between about 4 and 7 in the morning. You know, I'd make sure I was up at 4 every morning just to enjoy that bit of peace, because 7 o'clock, everything had to be like stashed away and hidden. And
that for me, when I look at that venue, because the rest of them, we talked earlier about now the fact that now you smash at the Colne Valley in your water at the moment, you're doing really well. It's my regular morning Instagram update is one of you with a nice Colne Valley view. But that fishing is similar in terms of it's different. You're missing that prospect of going out to a location and spending a week and relaxing and sort of getting into your surrounds. That is the exact opposite. How did you deal with that sort of, I don't know, sneaking around and making sure that you weren't present and being caught in those peak hours after 7 a.m? Did you enjoy that, or was it just an absolute effort?
I enjoyed the buzz of it.
Right.
But to start with, I mean, one of my biggest problems and one of my biggest sort of assets in a way is that I don't follow a lot of other people or pester a lot of other people for advice or whatever like that. So I went on, literally, I just thought I want to fish the Mere, and I went and fished it. So I didn't speak to anyone about it. I didn't know who was fishing there, if anyone. I was totally out of the loop on Colne Valley, totally. I was fishing abroad, so I knew what was going on down at Cassien, what had been caught last week. The Mere, didn't have a clue about it. I just knew that I wanted to go and fish it, so I did. And so all I was doing was barricading myself in a little hole in the brambles and just hiding away from everyone, terrified to come out. And you know, and it was a bit like that. It took me a long time to realise that I was hiding effectively, but I wasn't fishing effectively. You know, you could hide well and think, right, I'm safe in here, but the fish ain't here, so you know,
pointless. Yeah,
pointless really. It took me a while to get the sort of grips with it. I did lose one early on there. I think it was on my 10th night, and it was the first time I'd seen the Black Mirror. Actually, I'd gone down there and I hadn't been seeing anything. You know, I'd just been hiding, and I thought, right, there's nothing wrong with, you know, walking around. So I was just walking around and I saw a shadow in the top corner, right in the top corner. Got up the tree there, and there was this big common. Little did I, you know, it was the big common, this elusive big common that didn't get caught or whatever. But, you know, it's one of the first fish I see. See it a few times.
You see the Black Mirror at the same time, the same trip?
Yes.
How big was the big common then?
It was the same size basically as the Black Mirror. It was a bit shorter than the Black Mirror, but it was wider. Because I mean, literally, as I was sitting there looking at it, the Black Mirror swam in beside it. You know, so they were there side by side. So
imagine that for a brace.
Blimey.
Completed it.
Yeah, it was mind blowing just seeing them. And I mean, it was just solid weed all around that top end. All I thought to myself was, I'm going to bait every little clear spot that I can find around there. And there weren't many. I think I found 7 little spots, you know, that you could put a bit of bait on. So I put a bit of bait on all of those. Come back a day or two later, started looking around all the ones that was all still there, gone. And I sort of stepped back and looked at it, and I thought, bait's gone, you know, and it was like a shock. I just didn't expect it really. So it was just a little spot, and I thought, right, I'm putting a rod on that tonight. Well, literally, I had to sleep on the ground under a hawthorn bush because it wasn't a swim. Do you know what I mean? It was just under a bush, but it was a clear spot. One rod on the spot, literally under the rod tip. Sort of still thinking nothing was going to happen. Well, at midnight, it absolutely hammered off and freaked the life out of me. It really did. And I sort of went to jump up, not realising where I was, hit my head on a branch or something, rolled down the bank, feeling around for the rod. I was thinking, where's the rod? I was actually laying on it. I'd fallen on the rod.
No.
And picked it up, gone, hook length broke.
Oh, mate, that is a gutter. I can't imagine the feeling of losing one on the mere, mate.
Well, yeah, I mean, the disappointment sort of increased a bit over time. My initial reaction really was, I've got to run. I can catch fish out of the mere. That was my overriding feeling, was that I've got a bite on the mere. I've hooked a carp. So I didn't know what I lost. To this day, obviously, I don't know what I lost. Yeah, and as time goes on, it still goes through my mind what I could have done better, and obviously not falling down on the rod would have been a good one. But, that's fishing, isn't it? But it was a quick learning curve of just what the mere would throw at you, because 10 nights I've got a bite. I know what to do. Find a fish, put bait on them. Next day I come down, bag full of bait, water's all green. Ugh. Can't see a fish, literally that quick. Can't see a fish, can't see any spots, gone. And that was the mere. In a nutshell, that was the mere. Every time you think you've got something going on there, it would throw something back at you, like a brick wall. You'd find a little clear spot, get a bit of bait disappearing, come down, a tree had fallen on it or something, and things like that. The mere was weird like that. And, and it's not just me. Most people who would fish the mere, I spoke to Dave Lane, and he said, did you have all those weird things happen? It was a weird place.
Spooky.
Yeah, spooky like that. But everyone will tell you, anyone who spent a lot of time there say the same things. That it was like, it used to throw barriers at you all the time.
Talk to me about hooking the big one then, mate, because that, I'm just speaking it there, but the hairs on the back of my neck are standing up, mate, because that is some fish. Well,
yeah, this is obviously 5 years down the line from that first time going on there. But the thing was always to bait little areas in the margins. Once they were getting in the margins from sort of late May onwards, that was always the best way of catching them. So I'd always bait little spots and constantly monitor them, go round, come back and just see if it was gone. Sometimes it would be there 2 weeks, the bait, and you'd get one out and it would stink.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Rancid.
But then the next day it'd be gone. They would eat it. So, whatever signals they used to get off it, it wasn't how we would sense it. Do you know what I mean? I would have thrown them in the bin, but the carp would eat them. So I'd narrowed it down to one bay that near the beach area. I'd started to get a few things going on there, and that was the main area. That was where I used to see the black mirror most, and it was where I got them feeding most. So there was one time early in the year, there were 5 fish there under this tree, including the black mirror. Got them feeding a bit, caught a 34 common. Next time I saw them in there was 3 there. There was 2 original commons and the black mirror. Got the take the next morning. It was one of the commons, 32. Lovely old original common, but, I thought, I'm sure I'm getting close here. I'm getting close. Well, it was during the World Cup 2010 and England were playing this day. So I knew it'd be safe. I never felt safer in my life just walking in the mere because everyone was watching the football.
Yeah, cool.
Roads were quiet. It was lovely. Walked up to the little bay. First thing to do, check the baited spot. Looked over. There's a common, literally tail up. And I knew which fish it was. It was one they called the twisty common, one of the old originals. About 28 pound, one that I'd love to have caught. And there it was, feeding on me bait. I didn't, normally you just turn up and the bait's gone. You put a rig in there. Here it was. So I literally snuck into the bushes, set up a rod with a bottom bait, got back. I've been there 2 minutes. Got back with the rod, looked down, nothing on the spot. The fishes just sort of moved off. Perfect, chance to get a rig in. Lowered it down. I could just see the rig on the bottom, straightening it up. Just a single bottom bait, 16mm bottom bait. And just pushed a bank stick into the ground, put the rod on it, just one rod and a net. That was it. I thought, right, this is okay. I thought I'll send Joan a text to say, like, I've seen one already, you know, feeding. Just got my phone out. Bee! Off it went. Jesus. So it wasn't straightforward. Obviously, I'm just in a little tiny gap in the brambles near a tree. So it's a case of jumping in, basically. I had to jump in, jump in the lake and grab the rod on the way so that I could just get some clear water.
Yeah.
So I'm up to me chest in water and this fish is screaming off and I'm thinking, oh, that's going well for a 28-pound common, you know, an old one. Gone through a couple of weed beds, gradually dragging it back and it's sort of kiting towards the tree and then it's sort of kiting back but I'm still playing the 28-pound common.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And because of the angle, it's 4:00 in the afternoon, but because of the angle, I couldn't see down in the water. And as it surfaced the first time, I just remember thinking, God, that looked quite big. And, oh, well, yeah. Carried on playing it. I mean, it was fighting well, don't get me wrong, but, you know, I felt like I was in control all the time. And as it come up to the net, it sort of turned on its side. I thought, oh, it's a mirror. And there was only two in there. Well, there was three. I had seen a little fully scaled, about 15 pound. And there was a 30-pound mirror and there was the big one, but it didn't sort of register until literally it came over the drawstring and went into the net. And as the tail came over, there was that familiar flat lobe, you know, which everyone recognised it. And my brain just went into meltdown because it was like, it was really like an out-of-body experience. You know, it was like I was looking in from outside because it all sort of happened in slow motion, this tail going in and seeing it and disbelief that it could actually be happening, if you know what I mean. That, you know, after 5 years of like giving it everything and seeing it, like I was seeing it more and more all the time, but almost the disbelief that I was ever actually going to catch it.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it was in my net and I'd only been at the lake 5 minutes. Do you know what I mean? It was so weird. It was almost like the mere sort of saying, you know, all right, you've had it hard here.
Yeah, fair play. You've put your time in. Here you go.
Yeah. It was like that because it was totally different to any other time I ever fished there. You know, like everything was a hard slog there, except this day when I turned up, oh, there's a feeding fish, put a bait on it, beep. Oh, cheers. Just like that. But yeah, it was just the best moment of me angling life, you know, head and shoulders above everything else.
That is some accolade, but I think befitting of the fish in the situation, like you say, mate. What an incredible piece of angling.
So lucky as well, because literally that was the last bite on the lake. You know, 2 months. Normally when the big one got caught, people had stopped fishing there for a while anyway.
Yeah.
But 2 months later, there was that oxygen crash. They all died. That was literally the last bite on there.
All about timing, Briggs. You make your own look, mate. Incredible.
But it was, amazing.
So, Steve, after that, it's a bit anticlimactic, but this certainly isn't anticlimactic looking at the size of the fish. But it was on to Belgium. Is that right?
Yeah, and again, there's a bit of a story sort of behind it, really. After catching the black mirror, there was obviously a lot of attention came onto me because in the UK because of the black mirror and the standing that fish had. And I was doing sort of interviews all over the place. It won Capture of the Year in Carp Talk. So it was, you know, the black mirror, all of a sudden, people wanted to talk to me. And I did an interview with Rob Malin at the time. And, this went on for quite a while about the black mirror. And then he said to me at the end, he said, right, what now? Burfield Common, Yateley. Yeah. And that was, I thought that is so typical of the UK scene. Like you caught the black mirror, so obviously you're going to go and catch another UK big fish or, you know, target one or whatever. And I said, no, like I'm going to go for a Belgium mirror now because I had that fish, I knew that fish was in there and I'd fished it was the first sort of syndicate lake I joined outside of the UK. It took me ages, about 10 years to get in that lake. You know, I'd been there a few times as a guest. Lake's called the Surf in the north of Belgium. And there was some lovely fish in there. There was a big common in there all them big fish are gone now. But it was a big common in there. It got up to £70 at one time. But the one fish I really wanted to catch was, I called it the old mirror, but it was called Zeus, basically.
What a name for a carp,
Yeah,
mate.
great name. And great water, you know, very hard. It was it is about 70 acres, I suppose. Quite low stock, very weedy, not easy. But I saw a couple of pictures of that fish and I thought that's what I wanted. So after the Black Mirror, no, you know, that's what I want to catch, Zeus. So the following spring in 2011, it just so happened the guys on the syndicate were away. They was having a lads trip to France at one of the waters. So there was basically no one on the lake. You know, I turned up with Joan, and it was just us there, really. And it's one of those lakes that you've got to find the fish, really got to find the fish, you know, and they're very sort of tightly grouped most of the time.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of the lake that has absolutely nothing in. There's one little area that'll have quite a few fish in. So I had the whole lake to go at. So I set up in one area, which was, it's a boating lake as well. So I was set up quite near this boating compound. Lovely area, grassy bank to set up on and all that. And 2 rods were just straight out. There's a plateau, old famous plateau out in the middle. I had a rod on that, one at the sort of long range. And there was a little spot that I'd only, what had I caught? I think I'd only caught 2 fish already from the lake. And both from this little spot up to the left, there was a little plateau. It was all weeded up. But I went and had a look, and it was sort of Canadian pondweed. So quite often, especially when you look from a boat looking down, there's gaps in between the weed. So dropped down, sure enough, I could feel the gravel on the plateau. Dropped it down in there, baited up, and caught one that evening. I think I caught a 28-pound mirror, or 22-pound mirror, and a couple of bream. There was some big bream in there, which were a bit of a nuisance, but they started to actually help clear the plateau.
Spot, yeah.
I went out and, you know, it's the old story. All of a sudden there's a clear hole in the weed where the bait was. So I started spreading the bait, and gradually this plateau was opening up, and it was where the fish were, you know, so they were very tightly located. Obviously this was where the fish were. So started getting a few, one of the old commons, they called it the leopard. It was a really old fish, one of the ones to catch, if you know what I mean. It was, I think, low 40, 42, something like that. Lovely old carp. A couple of other stocky mirrors up to about 35, but action started to come sort of fairly consistent. I think it was on the 3rd morning, again, like tip wanged round, you know, same rod, everything was happening just on this one rod. Playing the fish from the boat, and I sort of brought the fish halfway. So I got it away from the weedy plateau, and I sort of met it halfway in the boat. And playing the fish, and I didn't realise really what it was at the time. It down in the clear water, it didn't look as big as what I thought, but it felt heavy. You know, sometimes those big fish, when they just sort of flick their tail, wave their tail, they've got that body weight that just the rod and the clutch starts going, and you think, well, I haven't actually done much, but it's just that sheer weight. And it started doing that, you know, and that more than anything, I thought, well, this feels like a big fish, even though I'm looking at it. When it actually came up and got in the net, I thought, that's Zeus. I thought, I'm sure that's Zeus. And got back on the bank, and yeah, sure enough, there it was. I mean, it's 61.5 it was. And yeah, I mean, that was, it'll never be as good as the Black Mirror because nothing ever will be. But it was a great moment because that after the Black Mirror, you know, take the Black Mirror out of the equation, that was the fish I most wanted to catch in the world. Anyway, if I could have any fish from any water in the world, it was that one.
Why is that?
It was just, sometimes you just look at a picture and think, God, I like that. I like that fish. And yeah, I just wanted to catch it. I don't know, you know, I get that now. I mean, there's fish I want to catch now in the lakes I'm fishing. You know, you look at a picture and think, God, I want that one. You know, and sometimes you catch them, sometimes you don't. A lot of times you don't, you know.
Yeah.
Like the big old Cassien mirrors. I've always wanted those big 70-pound Cassien mirrors over the years. And, you know, I've caught some big ones out there, but I never got those big ones. So, you know, it doesn't always happen. But that was one time, you know, I was on a roll fishing for targets, basically, you know, caught the Black Mirror and now caught Zeus. And it was a lovely moment that was. You know, I caught a few more good fish that week. Like I say, they were all there. They kept coming back to the plateau. It died in the end. You know, there's only on those low stock sort of gravel pits, there's only so much pressure you can put on the fish. But I think I caught 9 or 10 carp and, you know, a few bream or whatever. I caught another 50. I had Zeus was a 60, but I caught a 53-pound common, the long common. You know, and they were all sort of known. Everything was known. Tio, who's the syndicate leader on there, absolute brilliant guy, lovely guy, and a very intelligent guy. You know, very clever guy. And he's basically, that's his baby, the lake. You know, and he knows every carp in there. He's got a list of every capture of every carp ever in there. You know, and so he'll have a picture of a fish and he'll have every capture, the length, he always measures them, and the weight of its capture, which some people don't like that. You know, they like, you know, there's a lot to be said about mystery and all that.
Yeah.
So there isn't that mystery, but every time you go there, the first thing that comes out is the album because you just got to look at it.
Of course you have.
And, you know, those fish that you want to catch, you can see how they've grown in length, and they never grow in weight without growing in length, which is really interesting. And yeah, I mean, it's an incredible lake, and it's quite an eye opener because, you know, Tio, like I say, Tio's an intelligent guy, but a very respected guy, and the lake is a boating lake. You know, there's a sailing club on there, and it's very much a community lake as well. And it's the only lake I've ever known where everyone gets on.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is because of Tio. You know, he's very much involved with the sailing club. You know, they have meetings, drinks together and all that. And, you know, the people from the sailing club will come round and sit down and have a chat to you and, you know, ask you if you've caught anything, how you're getting on. Yeah, and
they're not driving through your lines like 20 yards out, no.
Actually knowingly avoid them.
Wow.
Yeah, and we avoid them. You know, when they come out, you put back leads on, you know, you respect them. And it's the only lake I've ever known. Normally there's always a battle, isn't there? You know, it's the boaters, or, you know, even the pike anglers. It's pike anglers versus carp anglers. And like on Chanticoq, you know, in France, the pike anglers will go out, and if they go through your line, they just cut your line, and it's always us against them.
Yeah.
On the surf, it's not. It's everyone's in it together. And it works really well. You know, so it just shows that if there's that little bit of knowledge about what you do and what they do, and a bit of respect from both sides, it can really work well.
Shed loads of Belgian beer as well. Keep everybody happy.
That always helps. Yeah. Well, that's one of the main things about fishing the surf. You have to drink lots of Belgian beer.
Sounds like a good syndicate, mate.
It's good. Yeah. I haven't fished it for a couple of years now, but I'm still a member. And
good party after the Zeus capture. You were there on your own, you said. Everybody was off. Did they have to come back?
Yeah, they came back. think they were back about. I think they might have been away the week before and came back that weekend when we started. So they weren't about anyway. But because I do remember seeing Tio that week. He came down that week, so he must have been back home. Yeah, certainly plenty of beers drunk to celebrate.
Nice one.
Yeah, amazing fish, Zeus, lovely capture. Really, really happy with that one. I was.
And you said at this point, well, before this, probably 3 captures along, there was this goal of starting to rack up £50 plus fish in different countries. How much of that sort of premeditated your choice in terms of destinations going forward? Was it all about that, or were you just happy to go to new places?
It was certainly starting to become a factor. You know, it was starting to become a factor. You know, I was had it very much in my mind, because besides the capture of the Black Mirror, there was also a big thing made that was 5 50s from 5 countries called the Black Mirror. So Belgium was number 6, you know, and I had it very much in mind, not as the only goal, but it was one of my goals. You know, I've always had different goals going at any one time, you know, trying to catch a floater PB or, you know, an English PB, 50s from different countries. You know, that was, it was one of many different sort of little avenues to go down, if you like, but it was starting to become the sort of main one, if you like.
Did you have a number in your head that you wanted to get to? Or was it just tick one at a time off?
No, just see where it goes. I mean, Crowie was starting to get a few under his belt as well, so he was sort of starting to catch up. So all I had it in my mind was just to try and keep ahead, really, you know, which meant going to more countries. That was until Crowie got a message at Carp Talk one day, and he rang me up straight away. He said, "You're not going to believe this. I've had a message from a guy in Slovenia." He said he's had 50s from, it was either 8 or 9 countries. He said, "I don't believe him." And I thought, well, no, neither do I. But he showed the pictures. And I thought, well, I know, one of them was from Rainbow, what is French 50. And I thought, I don't even know this guy. Where's all this come from? And it was like a dagger through my heart sort of thing. You know, it was me on 650s. No one in the world has done that. And all of a sudden, well, is this guy, he's had 8 or 9. Oh, Christ almighty. And that was my introduction to Christoph Kuderman from Slovenia, who's actually ended up being a really good friend. You know, I mean, he's a good angler. He's one of those guys who's just got the knack of catching a big fish. You know, he'll go to the lake and catch the biggest fish in the lake, first fish a lot of times. Some people just do it. You know, on occasions it's happened to me, but most of the time I have to wade through and, you know, like work at it and get loads of fish. Then I'll get a big one.
Why do you think that is? You've seen him fish, but like you said there, I've known people who are just inherently lucky, but you're consistently lucky over different venues with regards to big fish. Any reason particularly because you fish with him that is there any like method or baiting strategy or rig or any way in his approach that sort of says, all right, you ain't going to get many bites, mate, but if you do, it's going to be a big one?
There's got to be something in it. It can't just be luck all those times, you know. But it's not something even the people catching them wouldn't be able to tell you what it is.
Yeah,
you know. But it's not just him. I know an Italian woman, Luisella. I mean, she's lovely, absolutely brilliant. Little, very powerful, very sporty, but she's tiny. God, can she catch them? Absolutely amazing. You know, like Lake Shumbar 2 years ago, came on there the first time, caught fish up to 53 or 54 and said, you know, like, yeah, it's okay, but, you know, I'd like to catch a big one. So moved swims and caught an 83 pounder. And she's caught, well, that's not her biggest. She's caught, you know, a lot bigger as well and plenty of them. She just catches them. And it's almost like you once you've caught a few and you know you can catch them, it's that thing in your mind that I'm just going to catch them everywhere I go, and they do. You know, it's that. I'm sure it's a lot to do with mindset, even though you don't know you're doing it some of the time. It's like when you go to a lake, often the first fish is the hardest one to catch, or catching a 20-pounder, your first 20-pounder or 30. It can take ages and ages. And then when you catch one, you catch 3 or 4 because all of a sudden, I can catch a 30. So you go out next time, you catch another 30 and things like that. And the mind is such a powerful thing. And in fishing, it shouldn't matter because they're living animals. Your mind shouldn't be powerful enough that you're just able to switch on and catch fish of a certain way. But it's how it is. And I think it's that mindset when it's not talking yourself into it like, I'm going to go and catch a 50. It's belief in there, even though you don't know you've got that belief.
Something deeper, isn't it?
Yeah.
On a deeper level.
Yeah, and I really believe in that.
Yeah.
Because it's absolutely true. You see it happen, the mind is such a barrier as well. When someone hasn't caught a 50-pounder, they can go years without catching one because there's that mental block. And it shouldn't make a difference with a live animal,
No, there's no logic in it, is there?
No, there's no logic, but it happens. It is a thing, definitely. And I believe that, these people just, somewhere in there, they know they can catch the biggest fish in the lake and that's what they expect to catch. And it just happens.
Fair play to him, mate.
Yeah, fair play. Yeah. And, because I fished next to him 2 years ago in Bosnia. First time he fished, we'll come to it later, but the first time he fished the lake in Bosnia that we're going to talk about, he caught a Bosnian record. They didn't even know the fish was in there. First 30 kilo had ever been caught in Bosnia. He caught it first time on the lake.
He's brought it in the back of his van, Steve, hasn't he? I'm joking,
Perhaps that's what I should do. There's a thought.
We've done number 7 now. So this is the 7th 50 from a new country. You've gone from Belgium to Germany. How do you get from Belgium to Germany?
Well, again, which is a common theme running through a lot of this, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And Jürgen Becker, a great German angler, we'd met him at Lake Raduta. He'd caught the world record mirror before it became actually a world record. He was the first person to catch that fish. So he was a big name. And we met him there and talked to him many times. And then met again at Rainbow Lake years later, fishing on Rainbow, just going round at the end of the trip, having a shower, come out and chatting away. And he said, you're welcome to come and fish my lake in Germany if you want any time, if you want to come to Germany. Now, I'd fished in Germany. I've got some good friends in Germany. I like the German people. Very, most English don't actually know what the Germans are like. We've got this image of German people. And they're really nice people, very polite, very helpful, very genuine, and very sort of just willing to help you, basically. So, yeah, he said, I've got some lakes in Germany. Anytime you want to come, you're welcome to come out. So didn't need inviting twice. And he's got 2 or 3 lakes right down in Bavaria, right down in the sort of southeast part of Germany. And his main syndicate lake, it's about probably 20 acres, something like that. It's not big, but it's got some of the best carp in Germany. You hear a lot about some very big carp in Germany, but definitely. Most of the time, they're actually only in a few different lakes. There used to be like the Big Common Mary and the Mirror Joe. They were in lake which Crowy's now been fishing a bit. But they're not spread out all over the place. There's a lot of very good carp in Germany, a lot of very nice carp, but the real big ones are, they're only in a few different waters.
Yeah, quite localised.
Yeah. But Jürgen Becker's was one that, had a 70-pound, still has got a 70-pound common, probably 80-pound now. So, we went down there and there was only a couple of swims on the lake. So it was a funny lake because it's more or less, it probably was 2 lakes originally, 2 long lakes. But where the water level's up now, it's become 1 lake with a line of islands down the middle with sort of bars in between. Only shallow, but the fish can get over from one side to the other. But it's almost like 2 different lakes, if you know what I mean. And, well, the fish could literally be in one side or the other. But luckily there was 2 swims and we had them both. So spread the rods between the 2, basically. And it was a really nice trip. It was one of those trips where September it was. I was just using the monster squid at the time. Okay. And they loved it. They absolutely loved it. We started catching I think I had 330s the first day. As soon as I put them out, within an hour, the alarms were sounding. It was one of those, and I was a little bit unlucky because I remember he kept coming down, Jürgen, and he said, "You're going to catch the big one this week." And I'd seen it in the snags, and I thought that would be a dream. I didn't, anyway, to cut a long story short. Bit unlucky, but the story of my life with the big fish, perhaps there's that mental block because I had such a great week. And one morning, one of the rods went off. I was fishing just over this weed bed on the plateau. Rod went off. It was a bit solid in the weed, went out in the boat. In the meantime, another rod's gone off. So Jones sort of picked up the rod, but that was in weed as well. Mm. So I'm playing this fish, got it out. I thought, that's a decent one. And it was a common, but not the big one. But I've got that one in the net, raced back to the bank, really not taking much notice because I've just got to get back for the other rod.
Yeah.
So I got back to the bank, grabbed the other rod, and Jones said, "Do you realise how big that one is?" I said, "Yeah, but this one sort of thing." So I've gone out. Fish was just sitting there in the weed. Got it out of the weed. Started playing it as normal. I thought, well, that's quite decent as well, actually. That was a mirror. Got that one in the net. Got back, and the common was 57.5, and the mirror was 51.
Wow!
So a lot of brace of 50s. So yeah, that was. I had another 58 that week, mirror. So it was going well, and I thought I had a good chance of that big common as well.
Still, mate, that's 350s in a week.
Yeah, when I'd never caught one in Germany. So it was
2 things I wanted to ask you, and this is probably generalised across all these trips, but you say there that obviously your network of contacts is where the links are to get to these places.
Yeah.
But when you get weeks, for you, is it pretty much like UK fishing, where if you're given a choice of weeks, you want to go early spring before spawning and late sort of autumn time when they're at their peak weights?
Yeah, I mean, they are prime times wherever you go in the world, aren't they? I mean, it does vary a bit. Like Cassien, the best time to be on Cassien was December.
Right.
Which we made like a pilgrimage down there every December because both our birthdays, mine and Joan, were in December. So we used to be there for our birthdays, Christmas, all of December basically. And it was the best time to be on the lake. It was quiet. The fish were at the best weights. And yeah, that was the best time on there. Other times, like where I've been fishing this year on the island lake, local, everyone was on there. May up to June was the busy time on there because they're all trying to catch them before they spawn at best weights. So yeah, there is always that spring and autumn thing, midsummer. It's hard. I suppose it's something I haven't really given much thought to putting this list together. But when I think about it, most of them are going to be, I suppose, spring or autumn captures. Yeah, it'd be interesting going through the rest of them to sort of keep that in mind. I suppose Black Mirror was June the 18th.
Was it?
Yeah, I always remember that. I
bet you. I was going to say,
yeah, Raduta was May. Yeah, Africa was January, but then different.
Africa, yeah, completely. But there is some sort of symmetry with regards to that timing. The other thing I was going to talk about was bait. Now, obviously, there's an influx in terms of commercialism. There's a lot of our baits that have gone out and are now being used across Europe. But when you were fishing in those early years, you having access to good quality boilie that you're taking across, how much of an edge was that? Because I know from sort of even in my early time going out to shows like Swallow, etc., there was a tendency for quite a lot of continental anglers to use bulk baits that were constitutionally obviously not as good nutritionally or even usability wise as our baits. So was that a factor in terms of that, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was one of the things that really held me back a lot in the earlier years, that I didn't have that access to enough good bait. If I had good baits, I couldn't get enough of them. You know, I spoke about the Raduta times. I could have done so much better if I'd had all the quality. If I'd had Scopex squid at Raduta, God, if only I could go back in time with a van full of Scopex squid and go back to Raduta in those early days. Oh, you know, and yeah, quality bait makes such a huge difference. Yeah, and you know, for a lot of those periods, I didn't have enough access to it. There was a Belgian, well, Dutch guy, he wasn't Belgian, Dutch guy, Jos, and he always used to be down on Cassien. And he learned a lot from Luke Coppins, who was, of course, Nash guy, an absolutely brilliant angler. Yeah, well, he is a brilliant angler, but he was a brilliant carp angler. He doesn't carp fish so much now. Cassien, he understood about quality baits very early, and Jos learnt off him. And I was a bit slower on the uptake, I must admit. I remember watching him bait up. He was always catching so consistently and good fish as well. And he would only put like 12 baits around each rod, like quite big, 24 mils or whatever. And, you know, I used to say, yeah, I'm holding the fish here, you know, with that bait. I said, well, you're holding the fish just with 12 boilies. He said, oh, yeah, they're coming back for that. And he was dead right, because people would move in after him and the fish would just go. Different bait, gone. And he had learnt it off Luke, you know, the importance of good bait, even if it's not loads. It doesn't have to be loads. But if those fish could come back and have 2 or 3 24 mil boilies and it was good enough, they'd still come back for it. Didn't have to be loads of it. A lot of time, loads is better. You know, there's places where lots of bait is better. You know, there's no doubt about it. But quality is what counts, you know, and, well, Scopex squid is, you know, is just number one for me. It really is. I don't know, in terms of 50s, we're talking about 50. I know I've caught over 150s on Scopex squid alone. You know, it's just that good. It's the one bait where it doesn't matter where I go in the world, I know they'll eat that.
Yeah.
You know, whether I go up to Sweden where they've never seen it before, anywhere, America, you put it in a carp, eat it. It's just one of them. It's just such a good bait. It really is.
Confidence.
Yeah.
In terms of your baiting, I mean, this might be a generalisation, but for you, generally, and I know this is a big generalisation, would you say that you are relatively sparing in terms of your bait? You're not one to sort of pile loads in on a big spot and wait for a big hit. You're tending to find them, fish for a bite at a time with smaller amounts, or not? Or does it depend on the venue?
Yeah, horses for courses.
Is it?
Every
Okay.
venue is different. Cassien was very much 10 boilies around your hook bait. Some people go there and put loads out. Never worked for me. In all these years, it's like summer, winter, 10 boilies around the hook bait. As long as it's good bait, you know, they search out them good baits. You can sit there for weeks if you've got a bad bait that they don't want.
Yeah.
Raduta was the other, you know, when I finally found the key to catching them there, it was like putting out 20, 30 kilos and then sitting on it, because there were so many little fish and grass carp and things like that. They would get on it straight away. So you needed a lot out there.
Yeah.
To give the big fish, when the big fish come in, they would push the little ones out. You know, it's an old story, but it happened there just like that. And the bigger fish would move in, push those little ones out. And then, of course, you still needed enough bait there for them to keep them there. So, you know, I'd literally go in with 20, 30 kilos in one hit. And eventually, 2 or 3 days, the action would dry up. You put in another 30 kilos. So, yeah, it's very much horses for courses. Every water's slightly different.
Nice.
But yeah, that's that experience thing. You know, there's always experience to fall back on, which is, you know, that's something I've just got after all these years, that I go onto a water and I think, yeah, that was how it was there. There's always somewhere it's a bit like, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, totally. Your previous experiences, stood you in good stead. I took you on a segue there, sorry, mate, through bait and all sorts of stuff, but I was just very interested. Moving on to the next one, we've gone from Germany. Now, this venue, 2013, but even to this day, it has the world record in it to this point. It is an absolute crazy venue. I've never fished it. Like, there's just seems to be absolute colossal fish after colossal fish, and they seem to be getting bigger, mate. Talk to me about Euro Aqua.
Euro Aqua, yeah, I mean, it's the weirdest place in the world, isn't it? But yeah, weird and amazing.
Yeah.
You know, that it just keeps producing those fish. And, you know, it is what it is. I mean, it's a love-hate thing with Euro Aqua. You know, when a Euro Aqua fish goes up on Facebook, it's always divided. There's half the people love it, half the people hate it. All I would say about, you know, I'm just an angler and I'd rather experience somewhere than just talk about it, if you know what I mean. So I was quite interested to go and fish it and see it for myself. You know, and I had the opportunity to be the first English angler on there many years ago when it was still relatively cheap to fish there, actually. I was on Rainbow and there was a German guy, Frank Schmidt, who was one of the main guys on Euro Aqua. And he said, oh, well, you know, I can take you on there. You know, as his guest, I would be his guest and all that. And there was big fish in there. I hadn't done 100-pounder at that time.
Okay.
But it was doing monsters. And yeah, I looked at it and I thought, no, you know, like a lot of people, I looked at it, it's just too commercial. It was a very commercial type of fishery. And I was fishing rainbow. You know, I wanted to fish rainbow more at the time. So that was what I was into. Then all of a sudden, there was this 100-pounder got caught out there and there was a lot of interest and there was a couple of guys really wanted to get on there, and goes back to Simon Crowe again. He was the one that organised the trip, you know, and he said, do you want to go on this trip? And I thought, well, I don't want to miss out on it, put it that way. You know, there's all these guys. If they all went out there and caught 90-pounders each and I hadn't gone on that trip, I would have been a bit disappointed. Well, more than a bit disappointed. So I thought, yeah, I'll be part of that. And I think Ollie Davis said it a few years ago. He said to me, you're one of the few guys, you fish all of the waters. You know, you fish abroad, you fish at home, you fish the hard waters, you fish the easy ones, commercial, public lakes. Normally, you get like a Terry Hearn. He's got his English, low-stocked. That's what he does.
Yeah, you get pigeonholed, don't you, sort
of? And I've never liked to be pigeonholed, you know. Like Terry Hearn, you know, would he be a good match angler? Probably. Who knows? You know, I've had a go and won a couple of World Cups. You know, I like to go out there and experience these things and try them for myself. And Euro Aqua was like that. I wanted to go and try it for myself. And what I would say about it, you know, waters are always different when you're there to looking from the outside. You know, there's always a view. Most of the negative stuff, some of it's, you know, obviously for good reason or whatever. But most of it is from people who haven't been there.
Yeah.
If they've just got an opinion of it without actually knowing the place. It's, that place is this, that, and the other. And have you been there? Well, no, but so and so said about it, and yeah, Alex, the owner. I mean, he's a proper character.
Everyone says he's absolutely bonkers, isn't
He's
he?
nuts, absolutely nuts. But, well, I'll tell you a couple of things about him that puts it into perspective, though. You know, yes, he's a nutter. He likes partying. He loves socialising, and he loves drinking with people, and he'll always end up in the lake, summer or winter, swimming. And when I first went there, you know, I avoided him like the plague. You know, when I see him coming around on his little scooter, I'd get in the bivvy and I thought, I can't deal with this bloke. When I actually got to know him a bit better after 2 or 3 trips, you know, I actually started to really like him, because all of that loud bravado and all, it's a bit of a facade. You know, underneath that, he's actually quite a nice bloke. He's not a bad bloke. And I'll tell you one thing that sums it up perfectly is that the people he's got working there, he's got a security guard, he's got the general workers, he's got the woman who's the chef. They've all been there donkey's years. They've all been there since year dot. And that says a lot.
Yeah.
You know, that says a lot. It's the ones that have always got a turn, you know, they're there for a few months and leaving.
Yeah.
When he's got a team around him that no one leaves, that says a lot about the person. When you get to know him, he's actually, you know, quite a genuine sort of caring bloke, really. Family man, you know, he's there with his daughter Jacqueline, his wife. And so that's why I like to go to places and see it for myself, because from the outside, he's an absolute head case.
Oh, yeah.
And he's got that side to him.
The stuff you hear, you think, as you say, is completely different to actually being there. But the only way you can truly know is to put yourself in that situation.
Yeah. But, you know, he has got that side to it. But, yeah, I mean, he just, if anyone wants a drink with him, he'll have a drink. And, yeah, he drink to excess, jump in the lake and go swimming.
Really?
Yeah, he's crazy. But he was all right, really, you know. I mean, he didn't seem to have a bad bone in his body underneath all that. But yeah, anyway, the fishing, you know, a guy had 370s before we got there. We got there, it was freezing cold, November, I think it was. Absolutely freezing cold, really strong wind. And it was hard fishing. We're all told that the big uns come from out in the middle. You know, it's quite pressured. If you want the big uns, they're out in the middle. It was fish in the middle, not much was happening. You could get bites. It was like a gravel shelf going down, and then it was silt at about 11 foot, then pretty flat. Well, at the bottom of that shelf, I was getting bites there, but they were like 20-pounders, doubles and all that. Not really what you sort of went for. Eventually, a couple of really good fish started to come out. Rob Hales was in the next swim down. I remember we was all standing around talking one day, and he just went, "Oh my God." He'd seen the fish, like not very far out, went and put a bait on it, and probably caught that exact one, a 76-pound mirror. So, you know, but even then, Alex, he was in the lake that day. It's freezing cold. He said, "Oh, I'll jump in the lake and net it." "No, Alex, no." And we said, "Oh, it's huge." He said, "There's probably 200 fish in here that size." And we, you know, at the time you think, what is he on about? Actually, knowing now, he's right. It was. There's loads of big ones in there. But, yeah, we were struggling. I was fishing with Crowie. He had a 52, I think it was, 52 mirror, which put him on, he was, I think that was within 1 or 2 countries of me by then. So I was thinking, blimey, he's getting a bit close. Yeah. And it was horrible. Towards it, I think it was the last day or second to last day, they all went to have a meeting with Alex. He wanted a meeting about the publicity for the lake and getting people out there. I stayed on the lake or went back early after dinner, and it was really foggy. And there was one boat on the lake, you weren't allowed to basically use it. And I thought, right, no one's here, I'm going to use it. So I just took one out in the middle of the lake, felt around a little bit, donk, little bit of gravel or something, put a bait on that, come back, and 20 minutes that rod went off. And basically it was a 58-pound mirror. So, you know, nothing. For the lake, it's absolutely nothing. Do you know what I mean? Just a baby, really. But it was what I went there for. You know, by now, my aim there was, obviously hope to get one of the monsters, but bottom line,
50.
Get a 50. And that was it, 58-pound mirror.
Stroke pulling, Briggsy.
Yeah, it was a bit, proper stroke. Yeah, I remember when we did a talk before, you know, what's people were saying, you know, what strokes have you pulled to catch carp? And to be honest, most of the time when I've pulled a stroke, it hasn't worked.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Just you think, do this, do that, and for whatever it doesn't work. It worked that day.
Take that one all the way.
Yeah, it worked that day.
I wouldn't put you down for stroke pulling, Briggsy.
Well, obviously, I very, very rarely do it.
It's good from you. Good cover up. This is solid.
Yeah, quick backtrack. Yeah, the only time I've ever done it.
I think it's the only time I can recall, actually.
Probably the only time it's worked.
Yeah. But you talk a bit about their sort of proceeding in the other chapters as well with the other fish you've caught around Rob Hughes, Simon Crowe, and sort of them being involved or in and around the sort of trips that you've run. Talk to me a little bit about them, your time with them, your sort of friendship, because it, as you say, it's all about who you know, it's all about getting out there, but also what makes it is the people that you're around these places with and you go trips with. Sorry, I can't even speak, mate. But yeah, you Crowe, Hughesy, always got on, always have like an instant connection with regards to that sort of adventure fishing.
Yeah, I mean, probably more so Crowe. I mean, both brilliant people, both very good friends. I think Crowe had he was more tunnel vision on the fishing.
Yeah.
It sort of fitted. I mean, don't get me wrong, I did a lot of fishing with Rob as well. And I love fishing with Rob. We had some great times. When it comes to the trips away, Rob wasn't quite so involved in the trips away. You know, I mean, he had fingers in all sorts of pies. He was British champs he was doing, and holiday businesses, and you know, families and all sorts. So whereas Crowe, he was like fishing, and I was sort of fishing as well. So, but between us, I mean, I first met them both through Rod Hutchinson. You know, in the mid-90s when there was like the Hutchinson Dream Team, they called it. And that was the first time I'd met both of them. And we just got on well. And I enjoyed spending time with both of them, you know, on the bank and at shows or whatever, you know, socialising. Both very good anglers. You know, Rob probably doesn't get the credit he deserves because he probably doesn't spend as much time fishing as a lot of people. But he's got the knack of, he can turn his hand to anything, Rob. You know, any type of fishing, which he's done in the last few years. He's been fishing all over the place for different species. Very good. And, you know, Crowe's carp, just carp. And, but yeah, such a good angler. And yeah, you know, we bounced off each other well. And we've had loads of trips, really, you know, a lot of these trips. And a lot of them came about because of Simon or Rob or both of them together, you know, so got a lot to be grateful for knowing those two and spending time with them because they opened a lot of doors, you know. And don't get me wrong, it was I had my uses as well. I mean, for instance, well, I've known Crowe, what would it be, more than 20 years, I suppose. I've never been abroad in one of his cars. You know? Bless him. It was always mine, you know. It was like, can I leave my car at your house? Oh, how are we going to get there then? Well, we're not going in yours.
It's hard as a northerner, mate. It's like 10 hours before you get down to the Cold Valley. Do you know what I mean?
But yeah, I mean, you know, I just mentioned it to have a little wind up with Crowe. But no, I mean, you know, he opened so many doors, Crowe, and got me, as you've seen on these, you know, a lot of into a lot of waters, a lot of chances. Yeah, I wouldn't have gone on that trip to Euro Aqua if it wasn't for Croatia.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and likewise with Klaserie and so forth, so swings and roundabouts, isn't it?
Yeah,
Swings and
mate.
roundabouts.
Yeah.
But
totally.
yeah, good relationship with those two. Two brilliant anglers, brilliant guys.
Yeah, top boys. Top boys. After Euro Aqua, I think we're on number 9. So we're edging through. We're at the thinner end of things, but there's still a few more to go. Was it Poland next, mate?
Oh, Poland, yeah. I mean, Poland is such an underrated country on the Carp Sea. You don't hear much about Poland, but then you look back through history, Poland's such a big part of it. UK history, a lot of, most of the young guys wouldn't know what we're talking about, but, a lot of our carp, original scaly English carp originated from Poland. They just did. So there's a lot of history going back, and Poland's a lovely country, lovely people. They really like the English, the Polish guys. That was, I got that straight away. As soon as I went to Poland, that it was, everyone was very friendly towards us, and very, very nice people. So, I've enjoyed a few trips to Poland over the years, and that it came about through, I was writing the world news every month for Carp World, Echoes Around the World, which was big carp from around the world. Well, I used to send that to Poland as well, because they had one carp mag at the time, Carp Max, run by Przemek Moroczek, who was so instrumental in the growth of carp fishing in Poland, because he was one of the instigators of catch and release in Poland. Years ago, fishing is so popular in Poland, but they killed everything.
Of course.
And he was very instrumental in creating waters for catch and release carp fishing, and now it's almost a normal thing in Poland. But because I was sending articles over to the magazine from the early days without thinking about it really, I was just like sent it on, and it was sort of forgotten about. But of course in Poland they were seeing me every month, so it become quite a thing for them. So when they was having, I think it was the 10th anniversary of the magazine, I got invited over there, and that started the ball rolling. We had a session. It was all lots of vodka. Yeah. Lots of drugs. They love a drink, the Polish. And,
what are you like with the old tip? You like a drink, mate, when you're on the bank or not?
Not really. It sort of comes and goes. There was obviously the period of the Colne Valley with Rob Malin and all that. You couldn't avoid it then.
Yeah.
So it was quite a big thing then, the drinking. So yeah, I've dabbled.
Yeah.
These days I hardly drink, but horses for courses again. When you go to Poland, and you've got to.
Be
really.
rude not to, wouldn't it, mate?
Yeah. So yeah, there's always drink involved in Poland. But yeah, one trip. Well, I realised how nice it was there. Very friendly, lovely fish, lovely dark mirrors, and all that. So the second trip, they said, well, we can spread it into 2 trips. We've got a little lake in the north called Tuzinek, and then we've got a special lake further south, big one, 400 acres, but carp fishing's never been allowed in there. That sort of, it's a bit off track, but it's worth mentioning because it's one of those moments that I always remember. But it was stocked 30 years before. Carp fishing has never been allowed, so we don't know what's in there.
Wow.
It could be, very exciting. But anyway, we had, I think it was 3 or 4 nights on this Tuzinek. Lovely lake, probably 25, 30 acres, quite similar to a lot of Polish lakes, and it's very thickly reed-lined, and you've got wooden platforms going out into the lake beyond the reeds, and you can either screw a bivvy down on the platform, or fish back and have your rods out there. which is what I did. Just a long run down the platform. sort of thing. Very silty. A lot of the Polish lakes are very silty. There was hard spots, but funny enough, it never caught anything off the hard spots. It's another learning curve. There's things that carp anglers look for, and there's things that carp look for. Mm-hmm. Carp anglers always look for a hard spot to present baits because it's convenient for us. The carp didn't want to know about it. He couldn't get bites off the hard spots. Only in the silt, it just sunk, everything sunk in the silt, and it didn't feel right, but it's where they wanted it. So, you always learn something.
Of course.
But the action just beyond the reeds all the way around was a line of lily pads, and most of the fish were in those lily pads. There was knocking around all the time. So, you're sort of fishing down there, and started getting a few. First one was about £12. Then I got a 20 and a 30. There was only 150 in the lake. There was 150.
150 in the lake?
Yeah, there was only one in there. So, just saying that sort of puts it in perspective, really, because, people think, when you go abroad, you're going to a lake full of 50s, it's just catching a 50. Mm. Well, a lot of time it's not like that. No, there was 30 acres and there's one 50-pounder in there. And I only had 3 or 4 nights on the lake. But I was catching these fish down the edge, but no one was fishing out in the middle. No one. Everyone around the lake. There was a few of us. We went as a group with the Polish guys, all doing the same thing, fishing around the lily pads. Yeah. So I thought, right, I'm going to put one out in the middle. It was deeper and even siltier. Just put a load of bait out there and just sit on that for 2 or 3 nights, see what happens. So first couple of nights, nothing happened, basically. Then last night on the lake, they got on it. And I caught, I think, a 32, then a 35, then a 40 common. Then I caught a 50, 56, I think it was. 50. I think, it was £56. It was the 50 in the lake. Basically just doing something
outside the box.
Outside the box, yeah. Everyone was fishing around the edge and all that. And the big uns just went and sat out in the middle, basically.
Rig-wise, any adjustments for the silt? As you said, it was even siltier come the middle. Longer hook length or different lead setup or not?
No, just the same. It's something I get a lot of questions about, and again, it's all in here with silt. People think they can't bear the thought of having a bait buried in the silt. It's got to be a chod rig where the pop-up's sitting that much above it.
Yeah.
Because in their mind, it's got to be visible if they can't see it. But if you throw a load of bait out there, that's all sinking down in the silt.
The carp don't care. They'll love it.
And they won't feed on the hard spots. That tells everything you need to know. If it's presented perfectly, like on here on the floor, and they won't touch it, but they're feeding the silt, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter. It's all getting your head around it. And all of the problems, 90% of the problems people have in carp fishing is in their own heads.
Yeah.
It really is. It really is. And most of the questions I get around that are from lack of confidence or not being able to deal with something. And deep silt is one of those things.
Yeah.
But out in the middle of the lake, that's where they want it to be. 150 in the lake. Fortunate, obviously, to do it. But I put myself in that position to catch it by doing something different. That it wasn't just a fluke capture around the edge like where everyone else, and it was potluck who caught it. I was the only one who put a bait out in the middle. That's where the fish was.
Mate, it's essentially like somebody going to Linear St John's for 4 nights and catching the big plated. Do you know what I mean? Like it's a one fish in a lake, and not as high stock as I don't think as sort of St John's is. So in terms of an achievement, there is look in it, but like you say, you've got to do something rather than just wade through. There is an intent in that move that you've made, isn't there?
Yeah. It wasn't just a fluke capture. If you know, I was fortunate. Don't get me wrong, but I did something consciously what other people weren't doing. And quite often that's what you need to do.
Yeah.
Sometimes, not always, but whatever it takes to catch a fish like that, you just got to find a way, haven't you?
Right, mate, you have. We're at number 10, Steve. Did you ever think when you were a lad growing up and you maybe thought about your adventures that you'd get?
Just before.
Go on.
Got to tell you about the 400-acre lake.
Oh, the special lake. Sorry, mate, I've cut you off there.
Well, it's only a brief one because we literally put that 50-pounder back and we packed up and went to the 400-acre lake that had never been fished. We sat there for, I think, 4 days, 6 of us on there, none of us had a bleep. And it was Proshemik who come back and said, there's another swim up there if you want to have a look. We only had this one area of the lake we were allowed to fish. We had a ranger checking on us every day, and we had to have the mayor come down to see us and give us permission. It was that special to get permission. Went to this other swim and it looked lovely. Put some, boilies aren't always the best best bait to use where fish had never been caught before. So I used maize, and I had this little clear, very weedy, little clear spot in the edge. And in the morning, about 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm thinking, is there any carp in here? Do you know what I mean? And it just 0 to 60, beep, screaming run, and like, wow, what a buzz that was. You get runs that freak you out, but when you're laying there thinking, is there even a carp in this lake? I hadn't seen one, hadn't seen a show or anything, and then to get that run was mind blowing. And it was this beautiful 34-pound mirror, old as the hills, probably never been caught before. One of my favourite carp ever, just because. And while I was photographing that, another one jumped further along, and I put a rod there and probably caught that one the next morning, and that was a 44. And that's still the biggest one that's been caught out of that lake.
Really? And this is when? 2000 and... Where are we at? I've lost my bit of paper, but sort of 2015, 14, 16, around there?
Something like that, yeah. I mean, there's only been a handful of carp caught out there, and that's still the only 20-kilo carp.
400 acres, did you say?
Yeah, 400 acres. Wow. Yeah, there's hardly anything in there. So it was mind-blowing session that was. It's...
What a trip.
That's like, people think fishing abroad is all about lakes full of fish, but that was like the Mere.
Yeah.
It was like the Mere. So very good. So, yeah, apologies for jumping in.
No, don't be silly, mate. I completely forgot.
That one
My apologies for skipping past it, because that's epic. Yeah, absolutely epic.
One of my favourite captures.
You've essentially gone to the Mere in 4 nights and had them all, haven't you? You've had 2 of the biggest that have been caught in that lake in that time.
Yeah, and the other guys, unfortunately, there was no bites for any of them. Yeah, so
Briggsy magic. Wee.
Yeah, got a bit fortunate, but
you've been fortunate a lot, mate. We've got up to number 10, and as I was saying, growing up as a kid, when you started properly carp fishing and concentrating on your carping and going abroad, did you ever think you'd catch 10 fish from 10 different countries over £50?
Not in my wildest dreams. I never thought I'd fish 10 countries full stop or visit 10 countries. Carp fishing has been so good to me, because it's got me around the world. If nothing else, it's got me around the world doing a thing I love doing. But yeah, no, not in my wildest dreams did I ever think, but it's amazing when you start doing things and keep going at it, what you can achieve, really.
Yeah.
I suppose that's a motto for life, really.
Do you think if you wouldn't have had this sort of goal and relative close competition alongside you with other people doing the same, not to your extent, but similar, that you would have struggled for sort of motivation in your angling?
Yeah, maybe. I might not have gone down that same route. I might have gone in sort of different directions with my fishing. I don't know. Maybe I could have easily stuck with the UK scene and just gone for big fish in England. But yeah, I don't know. I suppose really from quite early on, from catching 2 or 3 50s, there was that thing about 50s from different countries. So I suppose it was always there. And the competition does inspire me. I can't say it doesn't, because it definitely does. Because I was quite comfortable, when I was 1 or 2 ahead of like Croatia, and then Christoph Kuderman come along, and all of a sudden, blimey, I'm not leading the world, I'm behind. So, that was an inspiration to go onwards and upwards sort of thing, try and get more.
Imagine, you can't imagine because you can't put yourself back there, but if it was all different, you stayed on the UK scene, like, as you say, that sense of adventure, that sense of sort of some of the pioneering trips and the unknown is like, who would have known? Do you know what I mean? Without going, as you say, you wouldn't know, would you? It'd be all second hand. It could be very different.
Yeah, it could easily have been very different. Yeah.
Well, good job it wasn't, mate.
Maybe, yeah, I don't know, because we've had a lot of big and beautiful carp in the UK.
Yeah.
I haven't caught because I've...
You'll catch them when you don't have to travelling, mate. You've had all the big ones from Europe. Number 10 is, very infamous, very well covered in more recent times, is Sumbar in Croatia.
Okay, yeah.
As a venue, a lot of big fish. No?
Yes. Now, I actually, again, it's a common theme recurring. I actually fished Sumbar many years ago, in about 2006 or 2007, with Rob Hughes.
Okay.
Don't ask me how this happened, but we was invited out there to fish a competition with a load of Russians. Basically, Russians had the lake booked exclusive for a competition, which is basically what their fishing is like, competition fishing.
Yeah.
And we got invited out there as like a guest team. So we went anyway. Got absolutely annihilated. I think I caught the first 2 fish of the competition. And it was an eye-opener to how much bait you could put in a lake, because it was a 5-day competition, and I think for 3 days all the Russian guys did was bait up day and night. They never stopped, and I'm thinking it's just going to be mountains of bait out there. But then they started catching, and then they never stopped catching. And me whacking out my singles to showing fish. We caught fish, but we got annihilated. So it was an eye-opener. It really was an eye-opener. But then it was full of small fish. I think there was a few 40s caught, 2 or 3 40s, a lot of 30s, shed loads of 20s and doubles, and that was Sumbar. And then what happened was, I think it was 2013, there was a big fish kill, which is, again, happened sort of early last year, just periodically happens. I think the biomass of fish gets so big that something has to give, and nature cuts half the fish out. That's what it does. And that's what happened in 2013. Well, so the stock was cut in half or 2/3 were sort of gone. The ones that were left, all of a sudden, just they grew like wildfire. And very quickly, it became this big fish venue. The ones that were left just had a new lease of life. And that's when I sort of heard about it. People started having trips there, like big fish trips. And the guy who was organising the trips was Christoph Kuderman.
Good old adversary, Christoph.
But this was, really when I got to know him, I suppose, because we actually ended up fishing side by side. I was fishing with Tom Duncan Dunlop, who's a great friend, a brilliant guy. I love fishing with Tom. We went out there together, and Christoph was in the next swim along. So, and that's when I got to realise what a really nice guy he is. Even though he's very driven himself fishing-wise, he wants to catch the biggest, and basically he's list of big fish is unbelievable. But if he can help you, or if he can help me catch a 50, he'd do it. Do you know what I mean? He's not like some people would like, oh, I'm not having him there because he might catch a bigger one than me or catch me up. Nothing like that at all. No, he's really, really nice guy. Really top bloke. So, yeah, I mean, he knew the lake well, and he was catching loads of good fish, loads of sort of 40s, 50s. I don't know if he had a 60 that week. I think he did have 60s. But then middle of the heat in, it's the hottest place I've ever been. Heat was unbelievable. And in the middle of like this blazing hot sun, I've just got this run out of the blue, like 2:00 in the afternoon. And it was so hot, it was a joke. The sweat was just pouring off me. And this fish was just one of them. It was in it for the long haul. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't going to give up. And even at like 140 yards, it was just kiting from one side to the other and the other, taking a bit of line. I think, gee, I just wanted it to be over. Do you know? And it must have been half an hour, probably more than half an hour. But I knew it was a good one. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And Tom's sitting there with the net and his sweat's pouring off him, it's pouring off me. And eventually, and Christoph is there, and this fish has come in, and yeah, it was, he said it's £60, and it's very close. I mean, I had to be honest with it. It was 59.14.
That is honest.
Yeah, but it was over 50.
Yeah, I was going to say, if it was 49, 49, it would have been 49.15, would it?
Yeah. No, yeah, it just was what it was. And I could see in his face, he was over the moon for me, Christoph, you know, so I knew he was a good guy.
That's what it's about though, really, isn't it, mate? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's most of the time it's not like that, actually. You know, most of the time there's not many people that actually, strange thing to say, really want you to catch loads of big fish, or, you know, but he wants to catch the most, but he doesn't want me to catch less because of it. If you know, it's
I know what you mean.
So it's brilliant. Yeah, it was absolutely brilliant. He was still ahead of me then. I think that was my number 10, wasn't it? And he was on 11 or 12 then.
That's why he's happy for you. He's still one ahead,
still behind. Yeah, well done, but you're still behind.
But that, as in like a capture from there, like you said, the heat, you said all of that. But with regards to the actual fishing, was it a challenging week out there or not?
It was one of those all action weeks.
Was it?
Yeah, it was. There was still a lot of fishing there, right. And it was challenging in terms of getting the tactics right. We started off with really big hook baits, trying to target the bigger fish. And actually the smaller baits seemed to work better on there. As soon as I changed over to smaller baits, I caught another big 50 and caught a lot more fish.
Right.
So that seemed to be, little baits were definitely a lot better than big baits. And once we sussed that out, it was loads of action. The challenge really was just conditions, the heat. It was such hard work. Most of the action was during the day.
Yeah.
You know, carpy conditions don't mean a lot out there. They like those blazing hot sunny afternoons. You know, it's hotter it is, the more they want to feed. But it's hard work.
Siesta time, mate. Rod's in, big nap. But if you're catching them, yeah, mate, it's, I'd have them out if I'm catching them anyway, regardless. But as you say, the heat can be pretty intense in Croatia. I've been out on holiday.
Yeah.
And felt it. So, yeah, fair play.
Yeah, it must be the humidity or something like that out there, because I know it was high 30s, which is hot, you know, hot anywhere. But I've been in places where it's high 30s and it wasn't like the intense heat of Croatia, you know, where it's, even the water was 30 degrees. You know, it wasn't like you could jump in the lake and cool off. It was just warm and you get out and you're sweating straight away again. So it was
Sahara carping. From Sumbar and Croatia to Slovenia. Now, Slovenia's had a fair bit of coverage, again, more recently, and we're talking, this is 2017, so we're getting nearer enough sort of recent times, if you like. Talk to me about Slovenia with regards to a specific target? Was it a case of just going out there and fishing a lake that you knew had big uns in, or was there any specific targets that you had scattered around Slovenia? Because there's a few lakes that have got good fishing.
It was actually, the reason for going there was potentially a 50-pounder from Slovenia, because I hadn't caught one. But we was actually fishing Cassien at the start of the session. And what it was, well, we were just fishing Cassien, and we was on the phone. One of my very good German friends, Mike Puka, and his wife, Simone, they were in Italy, and they said, how do you fancy meeting up? And I thought, brilliant idea. I'd caught a couple of fish from Cassien. I was enjoying it, but I thought, yeah, brilliant. We go and meet up with them, have a proper session. He said, we can fish here in Italy, or he said, Slovenia's not far away. Ding, Slovenia. He said, we can go and fish there if you like. I said, yeah, Slovenia. Quite fancy Slovenia. So that's what we did. We drove across Italy, met up with them in Slovenia, fished a lovely lake called Vorgesrek to start with. Very wild lake, almost like a small Cassien, very wild, dammed valley sort of thing. Had a few decent big fish in there, but not many. It's mainly smaller stamper fish. So we caught plenty anyway. Mike caught, I had a 40 and Mike had one about 45. And he said, how do you fancy going to Smartinsko? He said it's a much bigger lake for 400 acres, something like 300-400 acres. He said there's a night fishing area, but he said you don't really want to be there. He'd fished it before, so he knew. He said where you want to be is in the day fishing areas. It's harder work, but there's going to be less people, and that's where you want to be. That's where all the fish are, because there's no pressure.
Yeah.
So that's what we did. We packed up and went to Smartinsko. You're not even allowed to stay on the bank as such there, but we found a little bit of farmer's land, which was up out of the way, but close enough to the lake that we could just walk down with the gear every morning. So that's what we did. We camped up on this bit of land. And there was two guys sort of doing a little campaign on the day area. So we didn't, we weren't going to try and, they were fishing an area really where we wanted to fish. It was the little point where we wanted to fish, but they were doing their thing. So
yeah,
we went and fished about 200 yards further down. There was no one else there. You could, through the binoculars, you could look down to the night fishing area, and there was just lines coming out and bivvies, and they were catching nothing. It was just camping. I thought, I don't want to be part of that.
No.
First day in the day area, we had about 12 fish or something, and it built up over a couple of days. I had a 40, 42 mirror, a few good 30s, and it was good. It's really good.
Day area fishing, was it going out and dropping on firm spots, or just finding where they are and putting rigs in amongst showers?
No, all we did there was go and bait up an area.
Okay.
First evening we got there, we went out, and basically I stayed on the bank. Mike went out in the boat, and he said cast out. So I cast out sort of as far as I could. He waited for the lead to land, and then went and just put about 20 kilos of boilies.
Go on.
And he said they'd be there the next day, and they were. They came to the bait. It was very deep, 25 foot deep, I suppose, wow. 30 foot deep. Very soft and silty. But again, it was where they wanted to be, So we caught quite a lot for a few days from there. But we had it in mind all the time that bigger fish were up on that point. They had caught bigger fish than what we had caught. And our action started to tail off. And it was it was getting near to the end of our time when we would have to leave. But then these guys said, we're leaving tomorrow. So gee, I've got to stay. We've got to stay. So, staying we had nothing to sort of get home early for. So we decided to stay another 2 or 3 days. But we'd have the chance to fish this little point, what we'd really wanted to fish in the first place. So we got on this point, fished as far as I could. There was a little plateau out to the left. Mike said, which side you want? And I said, I'll go on the left. What? I didn't know. And he wanted the right anyway, but he didn't say. So he was happy. I was happy. First bite, hooked into this fish, and it just went off like a steam train. It was just taking line and taking line. Oh, blimey, this ain't a 20-pounder. Do you know what I mean? It just kept going and going and going. And there wasn't anything out there as such. So I just kept going and going. I thought, okay. Took about 50, 60 yards, got it back and started doing it again. And blimey, catfish maybe, that's what I was sort of going through my mind. Mike was out in the boat baiting up or doing whatever, because you was allowed to bait up in the boat.
Okay.
But you couldn't drop rigs.
You cast in, but baiting up in the boat.
Yeah. So he come back anyway. He said, "He's still got that on." He said, "I couldn't." I said, "Yeah, I think it is." And well, I mean, it was a big, long, strong battle. And then this big common come up, blimey, and it was the worst bit about the swim was the last 20 metres, because that's where all the tree stumps were. There's a lot of tree stumps, so it was a bit fraught with danger, that bit. But got it in the net, and 53-pound common. Job done.
Thanks for the trip, boys.
Oh, yeah. That was, I suppose, a bit like Klaserie, really. It was fortunate that I had that extra little bit of time, because could have easily missed out by going home when you should have. Missed out on both of those.
Do you think a lot of these places, I mean, obviously I know there's a motivation to catch a 50, but a lot of these countries, not do you want to, but you haven't necessarily been back and fished the same venues too many times. Is that a conscious thing, as in the target's achieved, it's done? Or do you feel like that's not really part of your, not nature, but part of your motivation with regards to your fishing? You quite like the challenge and prospect of new venues?
Yeah, it's a good question, that is, actually. Yeah. And I suppose mostly I've gone there for a target. I went to that one in particular, Smartinsko, with a 50-pounder in mind. And once I'd got that, I felt like my job was done on there. Other waters are different, like Cassien. I would always go back to Cassien because I love it there. The syndicate in Belgium, I'm still a member, even though I do sort of struggle to find the time and the motivation to go there, to be honest. Yeah.
Any others? Like, I know Cassien, the romance of it, and it's part of you. You can see that. The passion. Yeah. I mean, everything you say is with passion, with your heart, but with the references back to that is the Mecca. But is there anywhere else? You've said Belgium. Anywhere else where you'd like to go back to, maybe retrospectively?
There's always waters that I enjoy fishing. Croatia, Shumba is one of them. I've got trip booked there November. We're there in November. So, I enjoy it. I like the setup there. Good people, good company, nice social, good fishing. So, I enjoy that. It goes back to, I suppose, what I said, some waters you never know until you actually fish them, whether it's going to click or not. And some waters I get that feeling and other waters I don't, and if I get that feeling, I'll go back, but a lot of times once I've caught the target, it's enough, really. So you never know. I mean,
never say never.
Yeah, never know, basically.
Well, I suppose also there is a concern from you, because a lot of these venues, I don't know if this factors into your thinking, but when I think about it, a lot of these venues you've hit at absolute prime time. And if you go back now, the dynamic of the lake may have changed, or those fond memories that you have, sometimes going back's not always the best thing, is it?
Well, yeah, that is so true, isn't it? That is so true. Yeah, Lake Raduta is a prime example of that. I mean, it's still there, but the lake has changed out of all sort of recognition. He drained it down and took all of the snags out, so all of like the stuff that made it really what it was is gone. You know, the villages, the snags, the telegraph poles, the orchards, took all them out. So it's just a barren lake now, and the fish are gone. Different, all those old fish died. So yeah, that would be a real step backwards for me going back there.
Yeah. No, I completely appreciate that, mate.
I suppose, one of the things with Cassien is it's always kept rolling along. You know, even though all the original fish that were there in the early days, they're all gone many years ago. But it's managed to have new fish coming through. They get to £70, then they're gone. But even now, it's very much on a level. There's £70 carp in there. And it's not much different to how it was all them years ago, which is, I don't know, it's always grabbed me.
Yeah.
Not all of them do.
No.
some do, some don't.
Too right. From Slovenia to a place, well, Italy, beautiful Italy is, but Parco del Brenta, mate, that, I mean, is from whatever I've seen, and again, I haven't personally fished it. I was meant to be on a trip, but COVID curtailed that. Is very, very busy fishing, right?
It's a mad place. It really is. But a lovely place. You know, it's not for everyone. It's quite a commercial fishery, obviously. Loads of big fish in there.
Oh.
Very deep. I had the chance to fish it quite early on, and sort of, I don't know, I had this vision that, it's just a day ticket sort of type fishery with a few big fish, and I don't know if I fancy that. And even the name Parco del Brenta, it sort of, I don't know, it just put me off a bit. I didn't like the sound of it and whatever. But yeah, eventually I just started seeing pictures of it more and more, you know, and these big commons that were coming out there. And I thought, I don't know, you know, there's a really good chance for £50 there.
Mm-hmm.
And two, you know, it's in Italy. It looks quite nice. And when we got there, it's one of those places I did really like. You know, it gave me that feeling straight away. The family that own it, Antonio, he's there with his father and mother, his brother. They're lovely people, really nice people, really welcoming, really friendly. And like the head sort of bailiff, Nicholas, lovely guys, absolutely lovely guys. And straight away, I felt relaxed and at home fishing there. You know, and the fishing, obviously catching the carp or whatever is a big part of it, but it felt right being there, you know, and for whatever reason, I can't tell you the recipe for it feeling right. It just happens or it doesn't happen. And there it happened, you know, it felt very good. And so, we the way they do the fishing there, I mean, what it was a week that every year Nicholas the bailiff has for his own like personal fishing. And most of the guys he had with him were German guys, his friends, Germans. And they organise their swims very early on. You know, they don't do a draw on the day. They do it some months before. So
some dodgy German draw here, Steve. They tried to do you out of a decent swim. Or did you get a good one?
No, I got a good one. No, it might sound like, you know, and when he said to me, he said, well, you know, we've got you a couple of swims. You know, we've done our draw. There's a couple of swims. And I'm thinking, oh, right, yeah. Shoved
this
down
corner. This corner.
He said, basically, you've got a choice between swim 16 or swim 1. Well, swim 16 was Christoph Kudermann's favourite swim on the lake. He'd caught the big one out there years, you know, of course he had. First trip, caught the biggest fish in the lake. There's probably 3,000 carp in there. he turns up, first trip, biggest in the lake, you know. Not that I'm bitter.
Classic, yeah.
No, I'm not, you know. But so I had choice of that one or swim one, which was a point, the main point on the lake, which covers loads of water. You know, when I looked at it, I thought, God, I'd love to be on that. And that was one of the swims they'd left for me. Plus, I was with Joan at the time. She had, I think, she still had a broken leg from the Cassien trip. Yeah, so she was in plaster, and the toilets and clubhouse were sort of behind the point and swim. So we'll have swim one because that's the obvious.
Yeah,
and yeah, it was fantastic. I mean, the problem you had with swim one is that it's got a lot of water, and there were fish jumping sort of all over the place, really. So you could either, well, it started off like casting to showing fish, started getting a few. It was November, so it's quite rainy and chilly, but we're still catching fish. And eventually I thought to myself, I'm just going to narrow it down to a couple of spots here. And it was only casting. You have some weeks, exclusive weeks, where you can use bait boats or whatever.
Right.
Or it's at the discretion of the team. Well, everyone decided this was a casting only week. And despite what some people think, I don't mind a bit of hard work. Yeah. But I noticed that none of them were baiting up every day. You know, there'd be one or two guys that'd go at it for a couple of hours one afternoon, then that'd be it for 3 days. And I was the only one who consistently spotted every afternoon for an hour or 2 hours. And they're bait fish in Parco. They love a bit of bait. And it was quite noticeable that every day, I was there for 2 weeks in the end, every day I got an extra 1 or 2 bites. So it started off 1, 2 bites, then it'd be 2, 3 bites, then 3, 4. Every day it got more and more. And I kept baiting and baiting and baiting. Scope squid, pellet and hemp, all in 1 or 2 areas.
What sort of range are we talking?
It was 70 yards.
Okay.
There is an old feature that goes across the lake there. It's an old road, actually. And I was fishing just off the side of that, but to nothing in particular. It's just where it dropped off. The bait, I was just making my own feature with the bait, basically. But just keeping it clipped up, 70 metres in line with a tree on the other side, 3 rods, bang, 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 all in a line. And, you know, just kept going at it, and it just kept getting better and better. Yeah, and I think it was about the 4th or 5th day. Yeah, I know what made the difference. I was catching fish consistently, but in the sort of 30s up to 40 pound. And then we all reeled in one evening to have a barbecue. And that really made a difference. We had the barbecue that evening. It was like the fish, all of a sudden, without all the lines across the lake, had their freedom to move. And I come back, all of a sudden there was a different set of fish. There was 50 pounders out there. And the next day after the barbecue, I caught 50, 55. And soon after a 57, and then it went on. I had an evening where I had 2 60s, one after the other, within about half hour. And at 57, it was like crazy fishing. I had a lot of 50s. I think I had 3 60s and about 10 50s or something like that. And how many 40s and 30s, I don't know.
It's obscene, isn't it?
But just, but it's like, it gets addictive, doesn't it? Do you know what I mean? When you're baiting up and then all of a sudden it's working and you're getting 1 or 2 more every day, you just got to keep doing it.
But it's one of those, exactly. You know that the more effort you put in, the more you're going to get, don't you?
Yeah.
It's a formula to it. Yeah, mate. That's it's some venue I'd love to get on there, I think. It just looks relentless. Whether it be like that now or not, because it's had a load more pressure and a load more publicity, who knows? But I'm sure that...
Fishing his head off this very week.
Yeah,
Jones' grandson is on there now, Kane, with his dad, Warren. And, they've had 4 PBs between them already
Well
Warren's
done,
had a
boys.
68 mirror. Kane's had 3 PBs. He's had his first 60. He had a 59 before that. And yeah, amazing place. It really is.
Go on. Let's get across there, Briggs.
Let's do it.
We're on to 13, so we're nearly at the sort of, well, up to date with returns to the list. We've still got a few more to go. But a place that I think I looked at, I ended up fishing. It's called Vinkerveen, I think it's called, a big sort of inland
I
thing in
fished
Holland.
there many years ago I fished there.
But another choice that I looked at before I went there was Carp Lantis. And
Carp
this
Lantis,
is-
of course. Yeah, I
this
see
is
where
your-
you're going with this.
So, yes,
I forgot
I'm there.
about
I'm there,
Holland.
mate. I'm weaving in and around Holland.
Yeah.
For you, Carp Lantis, I've never fished it, but I did look at it. I know there's been some coverage from the Monster Carp boys on there as well.
Yeah.
In terms of the lake, which swim? Because I know it's a swim that you're in, isn't it, with regards to where you set up?
there's 4 swims.
Yeah.
That old story again, just diversion a little bit, who you know and what you know. When I fished Klaserie many years ago, the owner of now Carp Lantis, Kos, used to spend a lot of his time down at Klaserie, and he did a bit of fish farming there, which was how he got his relationship with the fish farmer to get the fish for Carp Lantis.
Yeah.
And he always said, one day I'm going to have this lake in Holland. It's going to, I'm going to have big fish there and all. You'll have to come up when I get it. Sort of, yeah, of course, mate. And years later, he's got the lake. Do you know what I mean? So he said it's, we fished it the week before it opened and had fish up to mid-40s, I think. Fantastic. Yeah. So, he said always keep coming back. Well, he was getting married and he was having his wedding on the lake and closing the lake for the week, so the wedding was going to be there and everything. But we were in Croatia, we was at Shumbar, me and Joan, on a 10-day trip. And I said, well, obviously we want to come up for your wedding. But I said, look, it's a long way. We've got to pack up 3 days early we've got to miss half the trip. Will you let us fish the lake? So he said, look, yeah, of course I will. He said, the lake's shut. No one else can fish it. But fair enough. You can fish it. That'll do then. I mean, don't get me wrong. It was a drive and a half up from...
What are we talking, hourage-wise?
It was about 14, 15.
Yeah.
It was a long drive. We set off in the morning and we got there late at night.
Who does the driving, Steve? You or Jane, or do you share it?
No, I do all the driving.
Do you?
Yeah. Joan does all the cooking. I do all the driving. That's always the deal we've had.
What a winning partnership that is.
Yeah, it works well, actually.
I've seen photos of roast dinners at Christmas time on the banks
Exactly,
of Cassien. You can't get much better than that, can you?
I've only got to do one drive each way.
Easy job. I'll take that.
Yeah. and to be fair, I don't mind driving, which is a big part of being able to do all of this, because there's a lot of guys that can't handle the driving, just can't do it. And I've always been able to do it. So it's, I can do 17 hours straight. I've done it a few times, driven home from Hungary, 17 hours straight.
That is a lot. I suppose nowadays you've got the option, well, obviously before sort of where we are now and opening up hopefully in the not too distant future, you've got the option of flying to a lot of venues, haven't you? There's a lot of packages now where you can fly. You don't use your own gear, I know, or whatever, but you can do if driving is an issue. But there's something magical about getting on that tunnel and going out the other side.
I'll always drive. Even if you can fly it somewhere in 4 hours and it takes 24 hours to drive, I'll still drive.
Yeah?
Yeah, because I love being in control of my own destiny. Flying, I don't mind flying, but I don't like it because you can't take all the gear you want and someone else is driving the plane. I want to be doing it myself. Driving the motor, stop and please myself. And when I get there, I've got all the gear, van full of gear. I've got it, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
I've got everything I need and it's mine.
Yeah.
So I haven't got using other people's gear, I never use it like I'd use my own because I'm always worried about damaging it or scratching rods. With mine, it don't matter, it's mine.
Yeah.
If I break a rod, so it's mine.
And also you've not got that horrible sort of doubt of whether you've not got something that you might need for a certain eventuality.
Yeah, I've always got it.
Yeah. I get
Yeah.
it completely. Sorry, mate, I've taken you off topic there. We're on Carp Lantis.
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah. So we got up there anyway, and, you know, we've had the wedding, and the wedding was fantastic. You know, it's in his clubhouse on the lake. Lovely guy, Kos, and Hevis, his wife. Brilliant people. So, you know, next day we've got the gear down, and I forget the name of the swims. I'd basically, there's a swim in front of the clubhouse, and that's the only one I haven't fished. There's 4 swims, and the first time I was in sort of right at the clubhouse. Second time I was next one down. This time I was in left of the club. Yeah. No particular reason. Do you know what I mean? They're all good swims. Like, there's only 4 swims on the lake, so he's not going to be duff swims, you know. But just fancied that one. And a lot of deep water out there. It's very deep. Some nice areas in the deep water, but struggled to get a bit of action from them. But I started to get a couple of fish. There is a nice plateau in that swim up to the right. That was one of the main reasons for going in there. I seem to remember that there is a nice bit up there to the right. But I didn't fish it. I just baited it for the first few days. I thought, well, I've got the whole lake. There's no real rush. I'll put a bit of bait on that and leave it and start fishing these other spots. And it's not an easy lake, Carp Lantis. It's definitely not. The fish are lovely. They really are nice fish. But, you know, if they're in the mood and you start getting it going, it can be good. And I did start getting a few fish, mainly not from the deepest areas, you know, even though there was I found this lovely spot, fish sort of showing, but it was about 30 foot deep, something like that. And yeah, they just didn't seem to get down there. And he did say to me later, Coase, he said, he said they don't get caught much from that spot, even though they show over it. So I was catching them from sort of a bit closer in, but second or third day, I thought, right, time to start fishing this little plateau up the side. And it didn't take long. They'd obviously been in there having the bait, and I started catching fish off of there and started getting, you know, a couple of good ones. And I think it was sort of, I think I'd already had a fish on that rod that morning, a 35 or 37 something. And I'd put it back out, and it was a couple of hours, like sort of mid-morning when it went off. And, you know, I'm playing this fish, and you just know when there's that extra weight, you know, like this is a better one. Played it for a while and got this common, and I didn't know at the time it's one he's called the Super Moon common. It was caught on the Super Moon one.
Right.
But it was 51 pounds. First time it had ever been 50. Don't know if it was the biggest common in there at the time. I think it might have been. So he come round, you know, and sort of weighed it all properly with us, and 51 pounds. So
Holland off the list.
Yeah. I caught a 50 mirror that week as well. There's a fish in there called the fish of two halves. And I'd caught it. It was a 40 pounder. I'd caught on the first trip there. Actually, I think it was Neil Spooner caught it on the Corda video. He caught it as well. But Coase, he was actually sitting in the swim when I got the take, so he come out in the boat with me, and he said, "Oh, I know what fish that is." It's a first glimpse. I didn't know. He said, "Oh, it's a fish of 2 hours." I thought, "Oh, blimey, I know that one." Got it back, and again we set up the tripod and all that, and he said, "How big is it? 48, 49? I said, "No, it's 50 pound 8, I think it was." And that was the first time that one had been 50. So yeah, common and a mirror. So both the first time they'd been 50. So yeah, good trip that was.
Oh yeah, mate. In terms of so this time we're near enough up to date, but you've done your vlogs that have been on Nash, and obviously on your own channel. You've got coverage through Nash as well as a consultant for a period of time. What was it like in terms of your profile and travelling out to places in Europe? Do you get recognised? Do people come and jump in your swim and go, "Briggsy's on this," etc., etc., etc.?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I bet. How'd you take to that?
if I'm perfectly honest, my aim in life is to be left alone. I love being left alone. You know, even like this week in the Colne Valley, I fished 3 swims, and 2 of the swims I actually chose them because you can only get to them by boat. You can't walk into them, you know.
Right.
Don't get me wrong, I love the people. You know, I love people, and Joan is a real people person.
Yeah.
A lot of her trip is seeing the people, you know, as much as being out on the bank and that, she loves the people.
Yeah.
You know, and I like the people, but what I love most is just sitting there, just me and Joan, just sitting there and enjoying the peace and quiet. You know, my worst nightmare is having a swim full of people all the time, you know, even if they're friends, but, you know, it is a part of it. You know, you do become known being in the business. You know, I'm being perfectly honest here. And a lot of times I'll turn up to somewhere like Shumbar in Croatia, and there'll be people that hear I'm coming, and they turn up just to see you and have a selfie with you. And I always do it. Don't get me wrong. I'll always accommodate people. I always will, because there's different periods in my life. I mean, I could go into them where I've met people that were idols to me, and they sort of brushed me off, and like, I've hated them after that. Do you know what I mean? Like we spoke about cricket and things like that. You know, I love cricket, and when I was at school, we had a day out down at Canterbury to watch Kent play, and there was a guy, overseas player, Asif Iqbal, and he was a hero of mine. I loved watching him play. Went down, and there he was sitting in the car eating his lunch and all that. And I went over to get his autograph, and he like, piss off. Do you know what I mean? And he was really rude. And I hated him after that, you know. And I always remember things like that, even though it was like when I was a kid. You know, I thought, well, when people come round, even if I'm in the middle of my dinner on the lake or I've caught a fish, and the guy comes round and says, "Oh, can I have a selfie?" Yeah, I always do it. I'll never refuse anyone. Because of things like that.
Never meet you. What does it say? They never meet your heroes or something?
Yeah, they say that, don't they? Yeah, they do say that.
Pacific, but where are you? Do you know who this man is? Jeez, you should be asking for your autograph, mate.
But I'm always very conscious, you know, give people your time. That's important.
I suppose you've seen it from early years when a lot of us, like, I've got no profile anywhere, but if you go abroad, no one knows you. If you go in the UK, no one knows me. But for you, you've gone from no one knowing you to that sort of establishing that European profile as a consultant. And now, over there, it's just the same as being in the Colne Valley, isn't it? Pretty much.
It's quite strange sometimes, because especially like the Poland, what I was talking about, you know, I went there thinking I was just going on a trip, and I turned up and all these people, all of them knew who I was. Yeah. And all of them wanted to come up and shake my hand and all that. And it was all because I've been sending articles over there for years without even giving it a second thought. You know, just did it as a matter of fact.
Similar to Kev, mate. Kev says exactly the same when he was going over to those places and building all that sort of reputation with regards to Nash and everything else. But yeah, it's definitely...
it's something you don't realise what an effect sometimes you're having on people. You know, they're avidly reading your articles every month and picking up. Yeah. And I was just sending them because they asked for them, you know, without giving it a second thought. But yeah, but I always give people time, you know. So, but personally, I'd love to just sit on a lake on my own.
Yeah. You're going to need a week off after this time in the old studio, Briggsy. I apologise beforehand.
No, I'm loving this, mate. Love this.
On to number 14, the penultimate thus far. And we're going to the Czech Republic, mate. And this is 2019, so this is recent.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think. This would have been the one that overtook Christoph.
Really?
Yeah, because I think, what was he on, 12? It was either the Holland one or this one that overtook him. I think he was on 12, and so Yeah, 13 was the one that overtook him, so I'd got one in front of him. Yeah.
So this is a big one.
Yeah, so that had become a big one. So the Dutch one put me one in front of him.
Right, so you won in front at that stage. Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember which one was which, but I do remember all of a sudden there was a few, I think it was that year, that there was 2 or 3 different countries happening in 1 year, and all of a sudden I caught him up and overtook Christoph.
Have you got like some little Worldies Carp WhatsApp group where you go, hey boy, have this one? No? Do you stay in pretty close contact with him?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, and he was one of the first ones to congratulate me.
Oh, nice.
Which he would. He's that type of guy. He just is.
You said before.
Czech Republic, similar theme here. A guy, Jaroslav Tasinski, I'd met him on Cassien years ago, and he was. It was his first trip. He was a bit out of sorts, first trip abroad or whatever. He come over to us and said, broken English, where do you think the carp are? They went round the weed in the deep. Anyway, I think we was catching them round the weed, so we told him. Didn't know who he was. He was just a guy, foreign guy.
Yeah.
And he ended up catching some good fish anyway. So turned out this guy had a company in Czech Republic and a magazine and everything.
Wow.
Jetfish magazine, same thing. Will you start sending me articles over? So we did. And it's gone on for many years now. Still do it now.
Do you?
Yeah. And saw him at the shows all of a sudden when we started doing for a show. Oh, it's Jaroslav, Kept in touch, saw him down at Cassien. And same thing, he said, I've got a lake in Czech Republic. He's had it years now. You have to come over and fish it. Well, this was years ago, and for one reason or another, just never got round to it. It was never big on the plans. But all of a sudden, Czech Republic 50. I knew he had some good fish in his lake. So we saw him at the show. It was one of the Nash shows. I did it, the Czech show with the guys. There was Jaroslav. And so he said, could we possibly come over next year or whatever? Yeah, of course, yeah, come over. So we arranged, I think it was a 2-week trip in the June. And went over there, and God, this lake is beautiful. How we missed it all this time, I don't know. I didn't realise how nice it was. Absolutely beautiful lake. And he'd reserved actually 3 swims for us. There was 10 swims on the lake, and he'd reserved 7, 8 and 9 for us. But it looked like 10 was going to be the best. You could see the fish up one end of the lake in 10. I was thinking, oh, well, we better fish 9.
Yeah. But
we waited for him to come down. And when he got there, he said, the guy who's supposed to be in 10 isn't coming. He said, you can go in 10 if you want. So all of a sudden, it was like 7, 8, 9 were our swims. So no one was going to be in those. And we had 10. So we had half the lake.
Yeah, winner.
Basically. And there was, to our right, was an inlet coming in from another lake, but the other lake was a little bit higher. So the water was quite a flow, a little bit of a flow. And the fish loved it. It was obviously going to be a good spot. And I caught my first Czech carp in an hour from that spot. Put out the rods, it went off. 20-pound linear, lovely fish. But yeah, it wasn't easy. I remember going 2 or 3 days without a bite, even though we were seeing fish. But started to get a few good ones. Caught a mid-40 found a deeper hole. Caught a mid-40 out of that. But it was this inlet was the main focus of attention. And early one morning, that rod went rattling off. Fish kited right out in the middle. Knew it was you just know that feeling, that extra weight that they've got. I knew it was a better fish. And yeah, got it in. It was 56.12 common. Well-known fish for the lake. It was, I don't know, Frazinet. Not Frazinet. That was a strain of Frank. It was something like that, Francazette or something. It was a weird sort of Czech name.
Right.
It was a known fish anyway, known character of the lake. And there it was, you know, it was on the mat, like £56. And so that was
job done again. Rigs. We talked before about you're not riggy, but in terms of a lot of the rigs that I've seen you be successful on has been a bottom bait presentation with a snowman or with either a cultured up bait or that type of. For you, components wise, have you varied them, or do you stay pretty sort of similar with regards to hook pattern, material, etc.?
I do stick to a theme.
Yeah,
mainly I do change around a little bit, but only if the need arises. Like, you know, I was stuck when we used to do the Fang unis. They were a big favourite of mine. I use those a lot, and it was mainly with coated braid straight through, without any stripping of the coating or anything. And the reason for that was because I'd tried it one against the other. One on the places where I was getting a bit of action. Euro Aqua was one. The River Ebro in Spain was another, where you're able to test things because you're getting bites or whatever. And one thing that was getting me more bites was not stripping the coating. The one with the stripped coating wasn't going off as much as the one with no strip. You know, so basically I'd refined it down to what was a very simple rig. It was just a Fang uni, knotless knotted with coated braid. But what changed me from that was it was one of my trips to Shumba, not last year. Last year was a bit of a washout. The year before, I started getting a few hook pulls. And one of the guys fishing further up, he was doing really well. He was using slip D with a long shanked, you know, sort of hook, whatever. And he said, well, everyone's nailed for me, you know, with the slip D. And I always remember Alan Blair going on about the slip D, you know, what a good rig it was and all that. And, you know, he knows his stuff, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does a bit.
He knows a bit about rigs and fishing. So I thought I'd try that. And basically that's been me bottom bait rig since.
Yeah.
The slip D. Yeah, so
long shank twister, that hook pattern?
Yeah, long shank twister. At the moment, it's what I'm using up on.
Is it?
On the Carp Valley lakes. Yeah, with skin link. I have started stripping a little bit because I've been using the stiff skin link.
I thought you were talking about your private life there, Steve, mate. I thought we're going down a very dark path there.
Long memories. Oh, blimey, those were the days. But yeah, basically, just the slip D as sort of Alan would tie it up, really. I looked at how Alan tied it up and that's what I did, and it's worked a treat, really has.
Happy days.
Yeah, so.
Yeah,
but
man.
Yeah, I don't change a winning method if I can help it.
Me too, right. It's definitely been a winning method. Last capture, we're up to number 15. Not last capture today, I'm going to say, because there definitely will be more. But Bosnia. Talk to me about Bosnia. I mean, through my lifetime, growing up, has been through a pretty torrid time. It's pretty war-torn, poverty-stricken and everything else that goes with what's gone on there. In terms of the fishing, in terms of what you saw travelling around in that area, was it reminiscent of that, or is it very different?
Yeah, well, again, it's another one that I visited many years ago, 2006, 2007. Went there with Crowie again to fish a competition. This guy sent us an invite to go and fish out there in the competition, said he'd pick us up and take us to the lake. And all his mates said, you never get them out here to fish, you know, because to them we were like these big names or whatever, whereas we were just anglers and thought, well, there's an opportunity to go fishing to another country. So we went anyway, and again, we fished this lake that was a competition lake full of small fish. I think we caught loads. I don't think we even caught a 20-pounder. So it was one of those, you know, just catching carp. Then all these years later, you start hearing that Pelagacheva. I thought, where do I know that name from? And I thought, that's that lake we went to all them years ago. all of a sudden it's doing these big fish. You know, Christoph Kuderman's been there, caught the Bosnian record from there, 30 kilos. I thought, I mean, they've grown on.
30 kilos?
Yeah. First time we fished there.
Oh, of course it was.
Yeah. But again, he's organising trips on there. So, he said, yeah, if you want to, let's get you down there to get a trip sorted. So that's sort of, it's just basically that. He said, we'll organise. He had bookings on there or whatever. So we just booked whenever it was, the October, I think it was. And, God, it was a drive and a half. That was hell of a drive.
Do you drive it?
Yeah, we drove that. And we nearly never got in the country, actually. We nearly never got in there.
Yeah. What happened?
Well, Christoph, because at that time we were still in the EU and Bosnia was outside the EU. So he said, you'll need a green card. He gave us a list of all the things we needed. One of them was a green card. So I rung up the insurance and said, look, I need a green card for Bosnia. And this woman, a very nice girl on the other end, she said, oh, hold on a minute. And she said, no, actually, you don't need a green card. All you need is proof of your insurance. Well, all right, she knows what she's talking about. Got down to the border, where's your green card?
Oh, no.
No, I've got my insurance. That's no good. And they wouldn't have it. We were there 2 hours. And he even brought up on a map, it was only about 20 kilometres from the lake. He brought up the border and the lake on his phone on the map. And I said, look, that's the lake where we want to go. And he said, well, you can't, sorry. No green card. So we'd driven for, I forget what it was. It was 2,000 kilometres or something. I mean, it was something ridiculous. It was a long, long way. We were 20 kilometres from the lake.
No.
And they turned us away. They said, no, you can't come through here. You know, all you can do is try another border crossing. Right, we better try that. I thought, well, we're not going home now.
We're not getting anywhere. Yeah, exactly.
So we drove out, drove up the road, drove about another half hour down to another border crossing, got straight through. Oh, God, I mean, I was crapping myself. Don't get me wrong. I thought, what are we going to, if we don't get in there, it's back home.
Yeah.
After all that. So, but we got in anyway. We got in. And so we got to the lake and everyone's there. What kept you? Blimey. I told him the story. And he said, yeah, of course you need a green card.
You idiots.
Yeah. So there was
But you made it, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that was all that mattered. We got there. So it's a strange lake. The water was much lower than what I remembered it. The water was really low. So it looked a bit different. It's even the swim that I'd fished with Crowie all them years ago wasn't even there anymore. It's just, I tried to find it. It's just trees everywhere. It's totally gone. So it changed, it's sort of brought it home. Our places change over the years. But it certainly changed carp-wise because there's a load of big fish in there now. And
same sort of stocking density? Those fish are just grown on or had it changed?
A lot of carp in there that just got bigger.
Okay.
But there was also a lot of grass carp, a lot of catfish, which were a problem. They're taking them out now, moving them to other waters.
What are your thoughts on big cats when you carping, Steve?
Oh, I don't like them. I just don't like them. They just wreck a swim. There's a lot in Cassien now, and it's so frustrating when you're day fishing there and you get to the end of the day and it just gets to bite time, half hour before dark. Off it goes, £50 catfish. Swim's ruined. Carp have done the off.
Yeah, game over.
Rather not catch them.
Anything you can do? Anything you've found? Like, I don't know, clutching at straws.
The thing that the cats really like is big beds of bait. If you put a big bed of bait out, the cats are drawn to it. So a bit less bait, a bit more spread out, tends to target the carp a bit more, but it's very difficult. When cats are in the water, they eat almost anything as well. They're hard to avoid. So yeah, it was a case I mean, we came out last in a draw. I think there were 6 teams, all had a various section of the lake, and everyone said, I don't mind where we fish as long as it's not there. And I thought, yeah, I wouldn't mind anywhere really except there. So we come out last in a draw. Where do we get? There. And it sort of, it was like it was. It had the least water on the lake. It was sort of in a corner. It looked like it was going to be a tough one, and it was really. Christoph was again next door. Christoph was slaying it. He had 2 or 3 60s. I mean, don't get me wrong. We had quite a bit of action, but you might get 8 or 10 bites in a night, but only 3 of them would be from carp. They're big grasses, like big grasses, £55.
Oh my days.
We had, but I didn't want them. You know.
No.
Joan had a £50 grass carp, and I said, "Do you want a picture?" No, put it back. You know. And the catfish, they said just keep them and take them to another.
Yeah.
But it was hard work. And I wanted a £50 carp. That was all I wanted. And the saving grace was there was a Polish guy and his girlfriend in the swim opposite.
Yeah.
And they were doing really well. They were catching a lot of fish. They had a big bay to their right, and they had the fish sort of pinned in this bay, and they were catching lots. And they were catching so many that they decided to have a day off and go out and do a bit of sightseeing. Oh. So for a day and a night, they were gone. And in that day, with their lines out, the fish moved out. And in that period, I caught 2 50s, 2 £50 mirrors. I had a 51 and a 53, I think it was.
What a relief that is after that travelling, being stuck with a terrible swim.
It was just, thank God for that sort of thing. It was one of those sort of feelings. Thank God for that.
The relief more than the actual elation of catching one, mate.
Yeah, because literally they come back.
Done.
And it was, back to normal, back to struggling.
Briggsy, I don't know what to say, mate. I don't know whether to sort of bow down at your feet, get you to sign this so I can frame it in my office. The fact that you caught that many fish from that many different locations and you still going, mate. Like, this is not the end of it. I'm sure that next year you might have doubled this. Do you know what I mean? When things come up, who knows? But just an incredible life, mate. Incredible captures. I don't really know what to say, mate. It genuinely took me aback when as you say, no one's done it in the world. You're still doing it. There's still more to do. But yeah, if I got, a quarter of these captures, I'd be more than happy. But to do all that, mate, is nothing short of just, incredible. What a bloke. What a boy. There's nothing more I can say. I don't know what to say. I'm lost for words, and I'm never lost for words. I've waffled for a minute there.
Well, I've waffled for God knows about 3 hours.
No, you haven't, mate. Honestly, mate, it's been incredible. Before I let you go and get some time to yourself, because that's what you want, you do have to take my Nash quickfire questions, and I've tailored some just for you, mate. And I don't think these have been in the original plan, so these might catch you slightly off guard.
Okay, all
right.
I like that.
Do you like that?
Well, I think so. It depends what they are.
Might not like me after this, boy. Right, 3 words to describe yourself.
Very laid back.
Oh, nice. If you had a choice to fish home or away right now, today, would you go away or would you stay at home?
Away. That's easy, that is. I want to be away.
Yeah. Bait boat or rowboat?
Oh, rowboat. But I don't mind bait boats. You know, everyone hates bait boats, it seems, but time and a place for them, but I prefer to be in a boat. So, sorry, one word answer, boat.
No, it's all right.
Rowboat.
I like that you can be as detailed as you like in your answer.
Okay.
It was quick, that's good. Tricky one. Rob Hughes or Crowie?
That's horrible, that is.
I've had to look away from you, Steve, there, mate.
No. Well, I'll tell you, the best times are when they were both there.
Oh, he's a politician as well, boy. Well done. Only fish Cassien for the rest of your life or never fish Cassien again?
Oh, come on. Only fish Cassien for the rest of my life. I've fished there for 30 years, so I would happily fish out my days on there.
Good. I thought as much, mate. If you had to pick one, if you had to listen to some music, drum and bass or country and western?
Oh, God. Out of them two, I've got a choice between them two.
Here's a choice.
Well, actually, it'd be drum and bass.
Would it?
Yeah, because country western's horrible. It's whiny. Yuck.
Oh, yeah, I'll tell Al to get the decks on for after this.
When we was in the Czech Republic for the show there, we went out to a club in the evening, and it was like breakcore. Didn't even know what breakcore was really. It was like proper hardcore stuff. I was the oldest one in there, obviously, but it was great. Actually, I really enjoyed it.
So a bit of you.
I wouldn't have thought it would be, but it was a great night. I actually really enjoyed it.
Hardcore carper of a different nature there, Steve.
Yeah, never say never.
Particle or boilie? If you had to take one.
Boilies for big fish. Scopex squid boilies.
One thing that you'd remove from carp fishing nowadays?
I almost said most of the people, but then Kev might sack me for that. So no, the negativity, I suppose, the Facebook nasty stuff. You know, there's a lot of stuff said on social media that's throwaway comments that is nasty stuff. And most of the time people don't really mean it, because when we go to the shows, like the Manchester show, it's heaving with people. And a lot of those people have got to be the same people who are commenting on Facebook. And yet when you meet them face to face, they're all really nice people. You know, they're not arguing and bitching all the time. On Facebook, it's arguing and bitching a lot of time.
Yeah.
And I'd like to get rid of that.
Fair play. An angler that you wish you'd fish with?
Well, I could. There's a few really from the very old days. You know, I'm not sure people would even know. You know, like Jack Hilton was my original hero, and he fished some of the waters I fished in those days, like Brooklands. You know, he wrote a chapter in his book about Brooklands, and I was brought up on there, so I dreamt of fishing with him. Jim Gibbinson, you know, I remember he was such a big sort of influence in those early days, and he was a school teacher, and I always remember thinking, God, if only he was my teacher, I would love to be in his class. And he probably wouldn't have taught carp fishing, but you know, I thought, God, I'd love him to be me school teacher. Nowadays, it's funny talking about it. It's just sparked something in my head that in his book, his original book, Carp, Jim Gibbinson, he said he liked to be alone on the bank, you know, and I remember this quote, to quote Garbo, I want to be alone. And I thought, what's the matter with this guy? Why would he want to be alone? You know, in those days, it was all about being with mates, loads of people around.
Yeah.
Totally get it now.
I'm all
totally
over
get
it.
And it's always stuck with me, that quote. So, yeah, totally get it. Yeah, I love,
Fair play. Last question. A lovely date night with Joan, or head off on a brand new continental adventure in search of number 16? What would you do?
Well, easy one again, but both of them would involve Joan. It would be heading off for number 16 with Joan, because that's what she would do as well.
Too right.
That's absolutely 100%. If you locked me in a room and brought me in here and said, what would you like? Would you like a date night with Steve, or go off to a new country, you know, 50 number 16? Get me out, get me on the ferry, the tunnel now.
Living the dream. You can combine both, mate. Steve, you are a living legend, mate. It's been an absolute privilege to be part of this podcast interview, mate. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Mate. And I will definitely see you again with number 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and who knows what else, mate, because it will happen. Thanks so much for coming in. Thank you all for listening and watching. Please feel free to subscribe and obviously leave us a review. Steve, to number 16.
Oh, mate, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for this. I've really enjoyed it.
Big love, mate.
Cheers, mate.